just because someone mentioned that they did not like the language of stumbling block, I'm going to actually read this quote that people have been talking around for half of
This
this.
fucking quote.
I have
Why
been
can't
gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom.
Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV, a cross ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, topics ranging from the silly to the serious. And today's topic is actually kind of serious. It's something that's been talked about for a long time. And especially in this space, it is a matter of heated debate. We are going to talk about centrists or moderates. Are they a boon or a bane? Are they holding us back or are they the only path forward? We're going to discuss this. I brought a lovely team together and we'll just kind of get into it. Thanks all of you for being here. Really appreciate every single one of you. Let's get into it. And we're going to start. Uh, Eli Monty, you're going to go first. Give us a
Oh,
brief opening and then we'll just kind of go around.
okay. Well, hello. My name is Nadi Laimonti. I am what I am. And so as far as how I feel about centrism and moderates, I just don't really understand how someone can be a centrist or a moderate. I guess it's just me. I feel like in this day and age, it just seems like after everything this country has been through, after everything that like marginalized communities have been through, for someone to remain on the center is just kind of weird to me. Like, yes, I'm still going to see that there's both sides. There's like good things on both sides. Like I just don't understand that. I don't get that. But that's me. And that's it.
Okay, I guess we'll get into it as we go. Next up, Loner Box, please.
um
Oh, just really quick, Victard,
Yes.
your background might be tossed. Can we nix that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Loner.
I don't really have the best experiences with people who are like I would call moderates. I think a really good example in the UK in the 2019 election was when moderates basically like almost held the balance of power for ransom because they wanted to cancel the Brexit referendum. So like, yeah, you can think of a few examples, but the problem is I don't think moderate or progressive, like I think moderate in that context doesn't really mean anything because depending on what group you're in, like the Overton window can shift whether you're in national politics, whether you're at a local level, whether you're online. So someone who's quite far left, maybe in the country they live in, can come onto Twitch poll and find themselves being called a moderate or a centrist or even a right winger. So depends on the issues, I think. I think there are absolutely times when progressives might need moderates, depending on what they're saying, but I think it's just very context dependent.
I guess we'll get into it when we go into the open. Next up, Ancom Psycom, please go ahead.
Hello. All right. So before we get too far into this, I know in our pre-panel discussions, there was the question of how we're defining this. So I'm going to put the definitions that I intend to use, and then people can, do what they will with that. So I define progressive slash radical as someone who wants to see drastic changes in the existing system, typically because they see that system as being inherently corrupt or broken, and considers that the only way to bring meaningful change is to build something completely new to replace it. Whereas a moderate or centrist may agree with the system being flawed and needing change, but thinks the radical is too extreme and believes that more basic reforms are all that's needed to correct the observed flaws. I tend to fall on the more progressive radical side. I don't think our existing system is able to be changed or reformed to the point where it can get rid of its existing problems. And so I don't think that moderates, who I observe as tending to have that opinion, are particularly useful, as they tend to align, on the broader strokes. They will tend to align with the more conservative right wing people who are looking to either preserve society as it is or return it to a previous state, or at least a previous imagined state. So as such, I don't see moderates as helping to actually bring about the kind of positive change that we're seeking.
Okay, thanks. I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. Sansol, you're up.
So I think that the word progressive kind of fluctuates over time, because what is progressive in 1960 might not be progressive, sorry, nowadays, right? So it's always going to be contextual as to the time. Given the current climate, progressives, I kind of agree with Income on his definition of what a progressive is. But I would kind of like broaden it out to be like broadly, because I don't think that most progressives or people who would identify as progressives necessarily want to like abolish the state or abolish like our current capitalist system or something like that. I think that like generally speaking, we're looking at people who are progressives that are like AOC, that are like Bernie Sanders, that are like Brianna Joy Gray. That's why I gave those examples in our group chat. That's kind of like the context that we're living in right now. So like, I think that while progressives have a lot of opinions that moderates might agree on, like broadly, right? Like you shouldn't be racist, like being anti-racist or something like that. Being, like strong social programs or something like that. The policy prescriptions and the solutions to the problems that we face are going to be kind of hedged in by the fact that you need broad popular support. You need a coalition of people to work together under a moderate's point of view.
Okay, we'll get into it as we go. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate you. Next up, first time guest on my channel, Victard, please.
What's going on? All right. A centrist is an individual or political ideology that falls between extremes of the political spectrum. Centrism is characterized by a moderate approach that seeks to find balance between the different ideologies and viewpoints. Centrists typically advocate for pragmatic and evidence-based solutions, valuing compromise and seeking common ground. Centrists aim to consider diverse perspectives and find middle ground solutions that take into account various ideologies, positions, as they are open to listening to different viewpoints and incorporating ideas from both the left and the right. By generally avoiding extreme positions, they prioritize maintaining a sense of balance and stability. They often advocate for gradual change rather than abrupt shifts in policy or ideology. By seeking this middle ground, centrists strive to maintain a sense of continuity and gradual progress, ensuring that changes are implemented in a measured and sustainable manner. This works to emphasize practical solutions that are feasible and can produce tangible results.
Is this from ChatGPT?
Huh?
Is this from ChatGPT?
Well, some of it, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But they prioritize evidence and data-driven decision-making, valuing policies that have a track record and or are supported by empirical evidence. Centrists find that common ground in building consensus among different groups and ideologies. They seek to build bridges and reduce polarization by fostering dialogue and collaboration. Centrists are often skeptical of rigid adherence to any single ideology. Okay. And they prefer evaluating policies on merits rather than blindly following a predetermined ideological stance.
Okay.
And for all of those reasons, I believe that centrism is a necessary part of our political process. And now, especially more than ever, when things have become so extremely polarized, and therefore it is based.
Okay, we'll get into it in the open. We'll see how ChatGPT fares.
That was just for the opening. Nothing else.
We'll see. Last but certainly not least, Vigilante, please, concise if you will.
All right, so I agree with Ancom SciCom's definition, and I'm glad he provided the definitions there at the beginning. My biggest problem with centrism is the insistence on bringing things together and not necessarily bringing things together, but sorry, I kind of mentioned it in our group chat earlier, but compromise. And because compromise contributes to things like the ratchet effect. And instead, oftentimes, especially in America, compromise brings us farther to the right instead of progressing things to the left.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and thanks to all. I guess I'll open up with this question, right? So, do we think that centrists or moderates can progressivism succeed without them? Why or why not? What do we think, gang?
I think that it clearly cannot, and you just look at Twitter right now, or the state of our political climate the past 10 years. It's been increasingly polarized, and I feel that people have this underlying acknowledgement that there is, like, we are moving towards this increased polarization is going to potentially lead to violence. And right now, you need some kind of force to pull back these extremes, who both believe that they are correct.
I just want to say as well, like America especially is like split right down the middle in the Senate. So how would you pass progressive legislation through if you weren't compromising?
Well,
So you're assuming that the radical or progressive side is necessarily focused on the legislative or electoral versions of politics, which, you know, personally I see the utility in some cases, but I also see that legislation typically is controlled not by the people who are voting for the representatives, but the people funding those campaigns. So generally speaking, it doesn't, like, and we can see this in the US political statistics, you know, doesn't matter how much the general populace supports a particular bill, it still has about the same chance of being passed. Whereas if you look at the amount of, you know, the top 1% who support a particular bill or policy, that actually does have a correlative effect with how likely it is to get passed. So it, like, the idea that the legislative route is going to get the sort of changes that progressives want to see doesn't really work out. It's very unlikely to come about that way.
Can you give me like one example of a
real quick, stop. Let's let Eli answer first, and then I have some questions. I'm sure Sansol does too.
I mean, I just want to say on top of what I believe was Ancom Psycom was just saying. Was that the person who was just speaking?
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah. On top of that, like, let's also not forget unequal and unfair representation within our government, within the Senate, right? Like, isn't it that California has like the population of like half the freaking country apparently, but yet Californians only get like 2 senators and to represent them in our government. Meanwhile, all these other states get so many fucking like senators to represent them and like their views and what have you. Like, so talking about like legislation or talking about like, you know, America split down the middle. It's not really split down the middle. It's just that we don't have fair and equal like representation within our government.
So even if you go by if you go by popular vote, if you wanted that system, which I guess you don't, but like if you wanted that system, I think Biden won by 7 million votes, but there was still like, but as far as California,
I love one person will vote. Get rid of the electoral college. That shit's like one of the biggest things that's holding us back right now.
Yeah,
so,
actually,
so should we just ignore
the
desires of people who live in like Idaho and like these smaller states?
Just that it's not that we should ignore those desires, but it's like if it's unpopular shit, it's unpopular shit. I don't know what to tell you.
It's not unpopular shit to them because like if we look at the way that our electoral system works, well, what you're saying is the people that live in California, New York, New Jersey, and Texas are going to be the ones that dictate policy for everybody in the entire United States.
Because that's where the
That's
majority
not
of the
actually
people
true.
Yeah,
Well,
live.
if you're going
Um,
by the popular vote, then yes, that will be true.
Direct
'cause the
versus
yeah,
force
but
states you
regardless,
just to clear it
if
up,
you-
just to clear it up, just to clear it up, the argument I guess here is direct democracy versus representative democracy.
Yeah.
Is that-
yes,
So
Yeah.
if we were to look at
Well,
the actual
yeah, no, what I'm
population
saying, though, if you,
figures of the 4 states you named,
uh,
California,
just-
Texas, New Jersey, and New York, that comprises, by my estimate, at most 25%. I can look up the
Well, don't
actual
forget Florida,
numbers right
too.
now and get you a more specific
I-
figure, but just
Yeah,
by
I
my
wanna-
estimate,
Florida,
that's about
too.
25%. Not
I want-
enough to swing the popular vote.
Okay.
Not to mention Texas will generally be quite a bit on the other side of that. So Texas already kind of
Not
serves
really
to
the way that
offset.
our not
Florida
really
also
because
has
we have
most
a
of
lot
the-
of left leaning people in Texas. It's just that like the majority votes Republican. Like in all the cities, like generally speaking,
and your
it's either going to-
gerrymandering is abhorrent.
I mean,
Well,
that's
yeah,
also
I mean,
true
sure.
of California. If you look at
Yeah.
a district map of California, you'll find that
I
the
mean, yeah,
rural areas swing red,
is
and
true as
the
well.
and the
Yeah, but
cities swing blue. Same is true.
But
in
it's
New
not
York,
like
same
this
true
is
in
like
every
close.
state.
No, it's not even no, because in California, it's not like it's going to be a swing state because of the rural areas, but because in Texas, the way our politics are and the way that our cities are, we're going to have a lot of left-leaning people in the cities, and a lot of people are going to be like still Republican. But it's not like we're going to have like anywhere near like California being a purple state anytime soon. Whereas Texas, that is on the table, right?
I mean, you are saying that like you have the electoral college now. That's like a separate debate whether you
Remember the
want to
Harlem
get rid of
Agora?
it or not. But if you're saying the system that you have now, if you're essentially suggesting that like what happens at the legislature doesn't matter, but I don't even know if that's necessarily the case, because within the electoral college system, you do need some level of public approval to pass policies. It's not like governments can just do what like the majority of Americans hate and get away with it, right?
Yeah, I was going to
Yes, I
ask this
can.
earlier, and Com, you said that
I
like
think they kinda do,
corporations
though.
are able to go through and
do.
basically buy
extent.
all of this policy. Can you give me like one major piece of legislation that was passed that is like not supported in large part by either party?
I can give you a meta-analysis where they compiled nearly 2,000 polls and surveys that asked for opinions about a proposed policy change and compared those to the actual passing rates. And
If
then,
this is the one that SDL often
I can
like
give you
puts
an-
out there, then this is that study says that there is some amount of movement
I
that
can
you
give you
can
an exact
do
example.
with. Well, really quick, the study I think you're referencing. There's some amount of movement that can happen with a lot of lobbying, and but these are generally going to be on like smaller pieces of legislation. But when it comes to like very large pieces of legislation, these are things that are going to need coalitions built in Congress. These are things that people like actually vote for. We're not going to see just like get rid of all what's like a popular example, like get rid of all Medicare, get rid of Social Security because it might give people in like corporate environments extra money, right? Because that doesn't have broad social support.
Well, if you look at even a few of the big examples, so like the infrastructure bill had popular support, it went through. Pulling out of Afghanistan had popular support, it went through. I think, so it's like there are, even I think Biden's executive order for pushing trans rights, at least in the states that were willing to do it, that was supported as well. So it feels like there are like pieces of legislation that do have a decent level of public approval that get passed. So
the
but
point
if you're-
is that the likelihood of a bill being passed is not correlated with its popular support. So yes, there will always be bills that have popular support that do get passed. The question is the number of them. How many bills that have popular support that end up being passed?
How many bills that
depend-
don't have popular support end up getting passed?
I'm sorry, are
How
you
many
asking
bills-
for bills that don't have popular support that end up getting passed?
Yeah, because you're making the assertion that people are buying these elections, they're buying this legislation, right? So that would assume
I'm not
that
saying
like
I'm not necessarily saying anyone's
Okay.
being bought, but I am saying that the interests of those in government and the interest of of those who are the wealthiest and control the most socioeconomic power tend to align a lot more than the interest between those in government and those who aren't in power. You know,
let me try.
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out, though,
Vic, I
because
just wanna-
Biden managed to get through quite a few bills despite it being like a 50-50 split in the Senate. He got through infrastructure, student debt, pushing trans rights forward, funding for Ukraine, but these were all popular. So I'm trying to think of a counterexample, like what maybe Biden did that was unpopular with voters, but popular
Let's go with the
billionaires,
fact that
right?
Biden still has massive immigration facilities at the southern border, things that he as I recall in his campaign, he indicated that he was going to start shutting those down. So far as I'm aware, the number of those facilities and the number of people held in them has not significantly changed in the last 2.5 years that he has been in office.
Question for
Okay,
you.
why were people mad? Why were people mad about the border facilities?
Stop.
There's just
Because
so many
that's
like
not-
things.
Oh my God, guys, you gotta listen to me when I tell you to stop. Okay, I have a question on that.
I wanted to say something.
Everyone wants to say something. We're gonna get in. Okay, I'm gonna go
Okay.
I'm gonna ask my question. Then we're gonna go to Vigilante, who's been very patient with his hand, and then we're gonna go to
Okay.
Eli Monty.
Sorry, wait,
That's the order we're
before
gonna
you go, but I feel like I asked a question that didn't get answered, though. I asked something that Biden's done that didn't have public approval.
That's
but yeah, I'm not.
it aligns with my question. The border things, does it not have popular support? Do the
No.
border encampments or internment things, does it not have popular support? I think most people low-key support it. Or maybe not most people, but a sizable minority, at very least, right?
It's also
Like,
because there were
Sure.
there were two hurricanes across I think Honduras and another part of Central America that led to a big surge after Biden got in. So when you've got those facilities already existing and you've got a very unexpected flow of people coming into the country, you can't really change that overnight. But actually, Biden had started fulfilling his pledge of reuniting families. That was the big thing with Trump. It wasn't
Exactly.
the kids in cages; it was reuniting families, and Biden has actually
Right.
started doing that. I think it was more than half of them have already
the big
succeeded.
problem.
So.
Yeah, the big problem with the border facilities that everybody was so upset about, it wasn't because number one, these things aren't being kept open because of corporate greed. They're being kept open because there's a lot of migrant children that come over, that there's an option between either putting them into some facility or letting them roam through the desert until they reach the nearest civilization. Between these two options, it's probably better to put them into a facility. The problems with the facilities were the fact that the families were being separated and that the conditions within the facilities under the Trump administration were so fucking bad that they were debating whether or not to give the children fucking toothpaste. Okay, so the issue wasn't the fact that they had border facilities that they had where they processed them and then gave them some court date and then said that you have to come back for your immigration hearing. It was because they were separating families, deporting the fucking parents, and then shipping the kids off to random fucking families to be adopted. That was the problem.
Okay.
So it has nothing to do with corporate greed.
I want to pass it off to Vigilante, then Eli Monty. That's where we're going with this. First of all, did your question get answered? Do you feel your question got answered, Lonerbox?
No, I asked something that a big piece of legislation that Biden's pushed that didn't have public approval.
Didn't the Willow Project wasn't that pretty unpopular and Biden pushed that through?
I can find it for you.
The which
Because
one?
isn't that the Willow Project? Isn't that about to fuck up our planet? And Biden wanted to push it through and it got pushed through, but didn't it broadly didn't it get quite a bit of pushback at the very least? Even if it
this is
wasn't
with,
I don't know what the Willow Project is, but I do know that if you're talking about
It's the
green
Alaska drilling.
Drilling in
yeah,
Alaska.
yeah,
okay.
that one. Yeah.
Okay, so when we're talking about green
What do you call
legislation,
it?
then we're going to look at stuff like the Inflation Reduction Act, which is unbelievably based when it comes to.
Okay, but I asked, but Lonerbox specifically asked for a bill or policy that Biden pushed through that was unpopular, and I was just naming the Willow Project. I was
So
asking,
I'm just looking for if you have the poll
wasn't
numbers,
it-
then you can tell me. But I'm just looking for them now. So if you have them, I don't know.
I don't have them on me right
It
now.
might
no,
be-
but
It was
We'll
about
we'll take that as a possible.
I just
answer
asked.
now.
I just
Okay.
asked
Sure. We'll
I mean, I'm
move
guessing
on.
if this is
We'll
in
move on with the
Alaska,
conversation.
I'd imagine, I don't know America that well, but I feel like in Alaska they would support that, wouldn't they? Isn't that like
I
what they do over there? Like,
I think it was the majority of Alaskans support it, and it was about 50% of Americans support drilling in Alaska. So
yeah, but this is
It
the
might-
problem is like it's really tempting to look at like polling at the national level and like,
Sure.
because if you're a proportional representation, that's what you would do. But America's a really big country and it's a federalized system. It doesn't work like that. So you can't just go by national polling and then see something happening in a state and then be like, well, we don't, well, the
Right,
people in fucking
I-
California oppose it, so it shouldn't happen in Alaska, right?
I also said I think 79% of Alaskans supported it
Hmm.
from what I was able to quickly.
Okay,
Vigil-
so we still need an
Vigilante, I
answer to
wanna-
that question then. Yeah.
I want to toss it to Vigilante, right? Because he's been waiting. So Vigilante, go.
So two things. With the Electoral College, if we didn't have the Electoral College and only had the popular vote, at least the last two Republican presidents would have never been president, George Bush and Donald Trump. Secondly, if we want to look at a failure of compromise, a great example would be Obamacare, because Obama ran on a system of more of a public option and then compromised to Obamacare, which it was originally proposed by the Heritage Foundation, which is a right-wing think tank. And when he proposed Obamacare, still no Republicans voted for it. So if he would have pushed for a public option and had pressured the Democrats to vote for a fucking public option, we would have a public option right now instead of the shitty ass Obamacare system. So that is still a failure of compromise.
Was
I don't
this
think that anyone
was
else-
that
the
because of
Republicans still didn't vote for it.
Okay, this is a really long time ago, but like at least for internet brain, but
It's 2008.
was this
It's
wait
not
was
that
this
long.
was this to do with moderates or was this to do with the courts, Obamacare?
It was
It was
to
to do with
the moderates,
moderates.
from my understanding. I was pretty young in 2008, so I don't know like too much about Obamacare. I don't think that anyone up here is going to defend that like compromising to the point where there's failed legislation is good, right? But I don't think that's what it means to be moderate, right? I think that what it means to be moderate is to try to coalition build, try to find something that like most people can agree to, try to find something that we can like feasibly, like practically get past, rather than try to like ram through whatever like political ideology we personally uphold.
Can I ask? Well, I do remember 2008. I wasn't two. I was substantively older. Obamacare, for all its flaws, and I'll just say this, is better than what we had before.
True.
I
It
will
wasn't
agree with
what
that.
we wanted, but it's better than we had before. So
I'll agree
again, you have two
that
options.
Obamacare. I'll agree that Obamacare is better, but then
Yeah.
I look at some of the nuances of Obamacare, specifically the idea of a public option. Right, that was something that was being pushed quite hard when after Obama was elected and when the actual policy specifics were being worked out. The idea that people could pay for a government-backed healthcare plan as opposed to a private healthcare plan, so that the government would end up competing with the private insurers. That was scrapped despite having a large amount of popular support, because, as I understand the ideas behind ditching that particular proposal, many people believed that it would evolve into a universal single-payer healthcare system, which obviously many people on the right and even in the center of American politics, disagree with and don't want to see happen. So despite the fact that it had a good amount of popular support, it still got removed. And something like the damn it, what is it called? Where the provision where everyone is
Sure.
the individual
ask-
mandate.
I'll ask you this. Right, I get
yeah.
it. Right, I get it. I'll ask you this. Right, do you think, as Vigilante asserted, do you agree with him? Right, that this could have passed without removing those mandates and things? Do you think that we could have gotten an Obamacare that was more to that had a single payer system and had all those things in place? Or do you think that this was the best we could get given the circumstances? What do you think?
I think more could have been gotten simply because the balance of power in Congress at the time was very heavily in Obama's favor, and
Well, they
so
were
the
Democrats, but they were
well,
Virginia
yeah,
Democrats, and
they were Democrats, but like
yeah.
in the House and in the Senate, like in the Senate, as I understand or as I recall, and maybe my memory is faulty on this, but the Democrats, as I recall, had a 60 vote majority. So the idea, so like they didn't have to drop anything that the Republican side didn't like because they had the votes necessary to overcome the filibuster. And as I understood the situation in the House, there was more than a sufficient majority of of representatives who
Does the rest of the panel
supported.
agree with this? Right?
I can't speak to Obamacare. I was
I'm
really,
just
really
I'm just having a look now. So I think the polling at the time was that the Medicaid expansions were quite, I think it was like a little bit more popular on a national level, but when participants were asked about their specific states, it actually went below 50%. And as far as I know about the expansion for Medicaid, it was shot down by the courts, not by
Oh no,
moderates.
I
So-
didn't talk about the Medicaid expansion, and yeah, the court specifically said that states were allowed to reject the Medicaid expansion if they so desired. I was talking about the public option, which never made it into the law in the first place.
Let's
It
try
was
a more
in early
recent
drafts.
example. Let's try a more recent example. Build Back Better. Okay.
Okay. So
a lot
I
of
looked at
people, just real quick, we got to get other
Okay.
people in here too. But let me
All right.
finish my thought and then we can respond to it. Build Back Better had wide popular support in America, but many accused the right and moderates in the Democratic Party of killing this bill, right? What do we think of that, gang? Do we think this is a better example, maybe a recent example of what Loner Box asked of a bill that had pretty wide popular support, but then was killed by moderates and things like that?
All right, so I actually, someone mentioned Build Back Better earlier, so I decided to look at what was removed from the bill before it finally passed. And here, there's some specific examples. Now, mind you, I haven't had the time to go look at the specific support numbers, so I can only give what was actually removed. But some examples are paid family leave, the idea that, so originally there was a proposal that paid family leave would include 12 weeks of paid leave. Then it was reduced to
Yeah, I
4
understand.
weeks and then removed
So-
entirely.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't want to get so much into the weeds onto every little example, right? Because then every little example we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about. My purpose of putting this panel together, maybe I wasn't clear, right, is to talk about the concept of moderates, right? The concept of moderates, either, depending on your viewpoint, holding progress back, or if they are like the bedrock that allows it to happen. So I would like to, if we can, try to discuss this on a more conceptual level, right? We can make examples and things, but we don't need to go 20 minutes into what
Sure.
policy exactly, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It
so,
does.
I mean-
I was mostly trying to respond to Loner Box and Sonsol, who had specifically requested
enough.
particular examples after I did give more general ideas. So if we're trying to go with a more high level conceptual, I'm fine with that. But we need to pick a lane because I can
Sure,
go specific, I can go general.
Yeah, so like what I think progressives are good for in at least right now as it stands is the idea of like pushing the Overton window in a certain direction. I think that if we look at Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, we can see that the Overton window for the Democratic Party was shifted massively to the left when it comes to things like Medicare for all, when it comes to, like being like anti-racist, shit like that, like these like broad social movements, being pro-worker. A lot of people became socialists after this, so that's praxis for you guys. So like I think that in like some way the Overton window being pushed and having the two the progressive cause and like the liberals in Congress kind of like butting heads is a good thing. But the problem with progressives is that they don't command the respect of people like broadly in America, whether it comes down to their slogans, whether it comes down to their policies that they push. These things are not popular. So what the moderates then move in to do the work of the progressives is to actually craft legislation that does appeal to more people, that does actually get passed, that does actually meaningfully impact people's lives.
And okay,
So,
so I will say,
can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Why don't we have universal health care yet?
Probably because as it's proposed by Bernie Sanders, it's pretty unpopular.
But
Mhm.
if I remember correctly, polling tells us that universal health care is a concept that is supported by the majority of Americans.
The
Yeah, I
concept
can't believe
is,
that we're
but
going
when
to
you
go
look
back
deeper,
to fucking
when you look
I can't
deeper
believe we're
into the
doing
polling,
fucking
like
2020 memes here, dude.
as soon as you
I mean,
ask
I'm
like
just-
go ahead.
one, as soon as you ask
I
like
mean,
one or
I'm
two
just-
more,
I want to give space to
I-
Loner.
as soon as you
Loner, I
ask
hear
like
Loner.
one or two more questions about whether it's going to be funded by taxes or how it's going to be implemented or how it'll affect existing insurance contracts for healthcare that exist now, the polling goes down. People like
Yeah,
the
the way it,
concept.
like-
There's no agreement. There's no consensus on implementation
Yeah.
or how it would get
Right.
done at a national
It's like
level. That's why
80%
not-
people 80% of people agree that like, yeah, universal health care sounds base. You can just go to the doctor. But then like you like start adding qualifiers that are included in Bernie Sanders' plan, like abolishing all private health care, like not giving people the option to like choose like better or worse health care plans and shit like that. And the I think that like if you look at the polling for Bernie Sanders, like after you ask this series of questions, if you look at the polling after all of those qualifiers are added, I think that Medicare for all as implemented by Bernie Sanders dropped down to like 35% max.
Public option
That's why.
has higher polling though. People like that.
Yeah, fuck yeah, public option. Let's go.
Public option for
it-
universal health care, right?
Public option
They're
would be a
kinda
form
different.
of universal health care, yeah, but
Okay.
like it still involves there being private healthcare
Yeah.
options out there.
So
Yeah.
so then
Okay,
okay,
interesting.
I,
It's like the
I
difference
have
between a
response
mixed
to
system and a
something-
fully
Yeah.
nationalized. Yeah, sorry.
I have response
as
to
long as we
something
have-
Sonsol
as long as we have people like Joe Manchin in office, it's not going to happen. You have as long as you have blue dog Democrats like Joe Manchin and his crew in office, progressive policy like that, it's just straight up not going to happen.
That is very true.
They stand
Okay.
they stand in the way of
Like,
progressive
wasn't
policy.
it? Wasn't it?
They're
wasn't
basically
it Manchin who-
Republicans.
wasn't it Manchin who killed? Was it Build Back Better that he killed? Basically,
He killed
remember correctly?
provisions of Build Back Better, specifically
Yeah.
the ones I was talking about: paid family leave, free community
Yeah.
college, dental and vision. Like he
Yeah.
killed a lot of those because he is a moderate Democrat. He is very much
Right.
a centrist, and I think that he presents
He is closer
a
to the
more
center, yeah.
significant challenge to the progressive to even the what would be considered internationally a very moderate Bernie Sanders Bernie Sanders, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, the progressive caucuses of the House and Senate. He presents a challenge to those that is far stronger than what the Republicans tend to present as far as like stumbling blocks, because the power will always vacillate back and forth because that's just how American politics is. But like when you have people that are ostensibly on your own side setting up roadblocks for you, even when you do acquire that, even when you are on the side of the balance of power in that ever swinging pendulum, you still can't get things done because you effectively have, you have stumbling blocks in the road that for all intents and purposes shouldn't even really be there. So this idea that moderates help progressives in getting these sorts of changes, they might help in getting toothless compromises,
Okay,
but like
let me try
I
this.
don't
So,
I mean,
really
you say,
quick,
you say like
I-
a toothless compromise,
wait,
but like it's
yeah.
a 50-50 split in the Senate. This is the system that you have. You can say like, as much as I hate Joe Manchin, no other Democrats get in that seat. You look at the polling.
Right.
As soon as Manchin's gone, that seat goes to a Republican. So
And you're
He's there
conflating
for a
all
reason.
the
He's
all
elected.
moderates. Really quick, I just
mean,
want to say you're
that is
conflating all
probably true.
moderates with being like Joe Manchin.
Right.
But do you think that Joe Manchin and Joe Biden haven't been butting heads for the entire 3 years that Biden's been in office?
I think
Or
the point
guess,
is that
2 years.
I think the point is
Yeah?
just that Joe Manchin is just Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are just such large obstructions to more progressive policy.
Well, then you should
sure
vote
they
in
are,
more
but they
Democrats that
represent
aren't.
their constituents,
Well,
right?
but also
And they're
but,
elected by their constituents.
Yeah, their
So
constituents
if
are the
it wasn't
roadblocks, so
popular
you'd
with
have to-
their constituents.
but
Right,
also
so then
like,
maybe go to
it's not
West
just
Virginia
that.
and
It's not just that, but it's also things like gerrymandering and what have you. And I mean, but also I have heard that
which is
basically
done by
like,
both sides.
Okay, sorry, we're
but
bouncing around.
also-
Before we bounce off to gerrymandering, I just want to ask one question about Manchin and Sinema. Then, okay, so obviously you don't like it that you progress moderates
Remember the
keeping things stuck.
Holodomor?
What do you think a more progressive Democrat Party or base should do about Manchin and Sinema? What should Biden do about that if he wanted to be more progressive and less moderate?
I guess he should call out when Manchin and Sinema are doing things that are anti what the Democratic or they're against what the Democratic Party is trying to push.
Okay, he calls them out. What happens after that?
I mean, hopefully he speaks enough to sway American opinion on them.
He
Have somebody run there.
Like people again,
Yeah.
have you looked at if you look at the polling for
Encourage-
other progressive Democrats, more progressive Democrats in those places, they lose to Republicans. And it's not like there's
Yeah,
a noise being made.
I was also
Everyone
gonna
knows
say-
about Sinema and Manchin.
I was also gonna say, I mean, I do understand because somebody said it earlier that was it that just said basically that if Manchin were to go, it would go to a Republican. I actually do kind of agree. I actually do kind of agree with that. I've heard that basically, and I've driven through. What is it? Is he Virginia or West Virginia?
West Virginia.
West Virginia. Yeah, I've driven through West Virginia. I've been to the Mothman Museum. He might be, he might be the best one out there, maybe. So I mean, we would, I guess, have to sway public opinion in some way, shape, or form to not vote in these people. And that comes with, exposure to other people, other groups of people, or what have you. But that's really hard, and that's a different topic. I mean, unless we do want to go into that.
I want to talk a little bit. Well, first of all, there's a bunch of people who wanted in. I know Sansel wanted in. I know Victard wanted in. I want to give space to Victard a little bit to have some say. I know he's been struggling. Maybe turn the volume up on your mic just a smidge.
Is that better? Here, let me
Yeah,
move it.
well,
Yeah, you're
Is
louder.
that better?
Yeah.
Yes, significantly.
All right. Forgive me
ahead.
for my first time. No, I was just saying. Look, Joe Manchin is not my favorite person in the entire world, but to pretend like he isn't an elected official that doesn't represent the wants and needs of his constituents, it is ridiculous. And he got there for a reason. Just because he has a D next to his name, I think you guys are focusing a little bit too much on that and not him representing the policies in which his constituents want. And it's kind of as simple as that. And if I were a progressive, maybe go down and do some work in West Virginia and try and change some people's minds on the ground rather than just complaining about a single boogeyman who's holding back the entire progressive movement.
We can maybe try. I'm not trying to simplify.
I mean, that's largely. I mean, there's something to be said there, but that's easier said than done. I can't just go
When
down.
life is
Yeah,
hard.
you would have. You would have to get people to actually agree with your policies and agree
Right.
with your prescriptions. But it seems like ANCOM has kind of been more on this line. So I don't want to straw man him too hard. But it feels like you guys aren't advocating for democracy. It feels like you guys want someone to ram through legislation that you guys personally agree with, even if
No,
the
not at
majority
all.
of people don't agree with it.
No,
Okay, so
yeah,
if you
we're-
don't agree,
it's not-
don't agree with that, then what do you do? What do progressives have to do? You guys have to get more public support. But if we look at the policies, again, if we look at the policies, if we look at these slogans, if we look at the prescriptions that progressives give, broadly, if you give them in the most watered down version, police reform, something like 80%. I have an article up
I mean,
if you guys don't want to
We
believe
tried
me on
police
the numbers.
reform though.
We,
You know,
we,
like, I mean, we could
we're
try
in the
police
process of
reform.
doing police reform.
Right.
But when we look
Wait,
at the
well,
when we look at the
we've
kinds of police
been-
reform that
been in that
progressives
process.
push forward, I'm almost
We've
done.
been in that
When we look
process
at
a long time, and there's
please,
still black people that are murdered by the cops unjustly. Like,
Wait, you
on a
realize that's
daily
not an
basis.
argument, or you'd have to look at
That's
some
not an
stats
argument.
on like broader systemic issues with the police. You can't just say,
I'm just saying,
yeah,
like,
they pushed a reform and then
I'm
one
just saying,
black guy
like,
got
you
killed.
know,
Like, yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
if
like,
we look at like the slogans
reform
and the
is like-
policies,
it
like
looks
getting
almost
rid of
like
police, either
non-existent.
abolishing or reforming or
Okay.
defunding the police, even
Well,
most black people don't
I
agree
want to.
with
I want to.
these
I
things.
want to
re-
touch
the
on
re-
this. Stop. I want to touch on this. You said that you don't think that the change is you, and I don't want to. Correct me if I'm misquoting you, not Eli Monty. But what you're saying is that even with reform, the needle hasn't moved. We haven't made any significant progress on this. Is that what you're
I mean,
saying?
yeah, because like I mean, we really haven't, because like there's as soon as you wake up in the morning nowadays, like almost every day, there's like another black person dead in the street to cops that just did that just because. And then there's all kinds of like, you know, blocks to investigating the military and the police for like neo-Nazi activity. Every other fucking day there's like a leaked recording of some shit that was said in a police department about how, yeah, all these guys are like Klansmen or KKK or Nazis or some shit. Like, you can say that, like, oh, we need to call it police reform. We need to call it police reform. We need to say we need to only do like police reform instead of more radical, like attacking the root sort of change. But
Can you tell me what that looks like?
we won't try
Okay.
police reform, and it's still not. We still.
But you're
got-
saying abolish the police,
major
but most
problem.
people, including black people, don't support abolishing or defunding the police.
I don't necessarily say. I think that maybe if you want to make the argument that we should change the way we word things, sure. But like,
I'm saying both the
I think I still
prescriptions,
could do that.
policy-wise.
Stop. I want to
But-
engage with his point here that things haven't substantively changed. Do you guys believe that on the
No, I
moderate
want to.
side?
So I want to ask.
No, I
you
don't.
can actually. So if you're
Bonner.
talking about, I'm just thinking like a list of things that Biden got through the Senate. So one was like extending COVID relief beyond the pandemic. There were a boost to benefit payments as well as stimulus to like 90% of households in the $1,000 to $2,000, upping child tax credit benefits. There was that. There was the infrastructure bill, which is obviously jobs, roads, all that shit. Support for Ukraine bipartisan through the Senate. So like. But I keep hearing like toothless compromises or like reform looks non-existent. Do you think these measures that have been pushed through by someone being moderate, reaching across the aisle, is this all like done nothing to you guys, or is it just like, what are you saying?
Sorry.
I'm saying none of it's
you-
addressing the core issues.
Okay,
None
how
of
do you?
it's
So
really
what would Biden have to do to address the core issues for
hold
you?
on.
Or like, but you don't want to do the electoral thing. So like, does it even matter what moderates are doing then? Because if you can do
Yeah.
like direct
That's
action,
the
and
thing.
shit, then-
I don't think Biden will actually ever take any action to address the core concerns. And that's, I think, what a lot of progressives and radicals think. Like, we don't see
Remember the
Biden
Harlem
or
Door?
the Democratic establishment at large as being capable or willing of making the changes that we view as being necessary to actually start to have real material effects on people's lives in such a way that they are measurably increased. And so like moderates can be, useful allies if your only idea is through electoral strategy. But, the ideas of like direct action, you seldom, if ever, see moderates
Okay.
actually
I wanna
getting on
give-
board
Can you
with
get?
those.
Yeah, I
wait,
want to give Loner a chance, then I want to give Sansel, then Victor to respond to both Eli's comments and Ancom's comments right here. I want you guys to engage with what they're trying to say, if we can. So
Okay,
Loner,
So
Sansel, Victor.
So do you accept then that you said you're as radical progressives and the core material issues? I'm just kind of gauging by the way you're talking. Do you accept that that your positions are just not that popular in the United States?
Yes, I do accept that.
Yeah. So there aren't that many
Yeah.
of you.
Maybe.
Yeah, you've probably like 4 people in the squad, and I think depending on who you ask, they're all too right wing as well, right? So if you want to do direct action, I don't think moderates generally stand in the way of you doing that. So I can
Unless it
point
involves
to.
like overthrowing the
So
government. but-
yeah, I mean, I can point to
I'm
the
not
things
talking
that.
about overthrowing the government
No,
necessarily.
wait, don't divert.
I'm
Fuck me, we're diverting. But I'm talking about like, so I can point to the things that Biden done that have had quite a material impact. I don't think anyone's complaining that they're getting like a few $1,000s in their child tax credits or benefits or pandemic relief, or the people are getting jobs through the infrastructure plan. So I can point to the material benefits there. They haven't like transform the entire nation with a 50-50 split in the Senate, but okay, great. But I mean, if you have like more progressive, like outside of the electoral system achievements to point to match that, like you can, do you or?
Wait, say again?
Outside yeah, he's looking for achievements that people have been able to accomplish outside the electoral system, and like when we're talking on the same scale, no, obviously I don't, because the
I mean,
the
Black Lives
movements
Matter did-
outside the electoral system are by definition much smaller.
Yeah,
they
but I
don't
mean-
have this kind of power
Well,
and resources.
Eli, stop. Eli seems
Go
to
ahead,
have an
Eli.
example. So Eli,
Go
give
ahead.
you
I was
your
just gonna say,
example.
I was just gonna say, like, didn't Black Lives Matter, like, because of the things that they were demanding get passed, the things they were asking for, and what have you? Didn't we get some like change that way as well? Like, wasn't it the chokehold or whatever that was banned from police department usage or what have you?
Breonna Taylor law?
I-
The
No knock
Yeah,
warrants.
that
You got
too.
the no knock warrants, yeah.
the no knock warrants, we got that stuff, we got that removed.
There might have been a national ban on chokeholds, but do you think
Here's
that
a- sorry.
was only because of progressives, or do you think that moderates and also even Republicans were on board with that at the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement?
I mean, no, I was
Or
just
the
I was just
protests at
saying,
the
I was just,
summer,
I was just saying, I was giving an example of something that happened outside of electoralism.
No, I completely,
what I'm
I
saying.
agree with that. Yeah, Breonna Taylor laws and the chokehold thing, those were good things. And one question though, do you think moderates could have had a better role there and maybe taken the messaging more away from defund and abolish the police to something that might have been more helpful?
I mean, I think if moderates had looked at the the inciting causes behind the Black Lives Matter movement and tried to actually push for meaningful reforms, even the more moderate ones, I think there could have been a lot more done. Like, I think what Eli is talking about were definitely good gains that the BLM movement achieved through its various demonstrations and what some might even call riots. But the problem is, with moderates, as soon as you turn, as soon as it becomes a riot, whether regardless who was the inciter to that, whether it be the police, counter protesters, or the protesters themselves, they always seem to denounce any action that is not just standing and shouting as being being immoral and meaning that they're not going to support that movement. They tend to take the
It has to align with their
That's
customers.
not even-
It
Like
has to not make
riots?
moderates
But that's not
uncomfortable.
even true.
Wait, you mean like
Even
you mean like
even the
denouncing riots? Like,
Do you-
is that what you're
yeah, do
against
you-
them doing? You're against moderates denouncing riots?
No, I don't think it's necessarily that we're against moderates denouncing riots. I think it's moderates focusing too much on the riots and like condemning them too much and not understanding like where or how you get to this point and like where this stuff like comes from.
But that's the
Is-
thing.
is
At
I
the
think-
beginning of the BLM protests in the summer, right? It doesn't really matter why the riots started. A lot of the time, people
I would
did
say it
see that the
does.
cops. Well, hold on. At the beginning, specifically, you could see like people peacefully protesting and then getting fucking brutalized by the cops, and even conservatives, even fucking moderates, liberals. Everyone was very, very in support of BLM. For the first time, it got like above 50% approval, like for like the movement. Right? But it wasn't until we saw like these ultra fucking cringe, ultra progressive people start doing shit like the fucking Chaz / Chop shit in fucking Seattle or Portland, right? Until we started seeing like riots last fucking into fucking November of 2020 that people were like, okay, maybe we need to slow this shit down a little bit. All right. We heard the fucking message. We want to fucking do something, but this is going on a little bit too far. So that's one thing that progressives will do that is really fucking aggravating when it comes to electoralism.
I'll let you respond.
I'll finish this.
Yeah, I'll
this
let
is
you
the last
respond. But
part.
I got super chats to read, so I want to get my money.
I just want to say, this is a fucking really aggravating thing that progressives do. That, in general, like I said earlier, I think that the moving of the Overton window is a really good thing that the progressives will do. But at the same time, they'll push and push and push until they take things so far that people start turning against a message that they otherwise would agree with.
Okay, $5 from Muda Agarwal to say Democrats weren't brought in power to please the progressives, but to please the centrists. Another $5 from the same man, Muda Agarwal, to say, should moderates ever be allowed to fail? Wouldn't failing of moderates' policies mean that one side of politics has too much power?
I'm sorry, can you say it again? What was the
Moderates
question?
do fail.
Yeah, wouldn't the failing of moderate policies mean that one side of politics has too much power? I guess the question is there a value to having an opposition party?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is moderates aren't the opposition party. They are, they're the ones who effectively fight for the status quo. They are generally supportive of, whoever is, whatever policies are currently in power. They tend to resist any sort of change, and when change is needed,
is there
that's
value
not terribly useful.
However, is there any value in resisting change? What are we thinking?
It depends on what the change is. If the change is dog shit, then you'd resist it. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like abolishing the police. Yeah.
Okay, I would say it depends upon it would depend upon the change. Yeah.
The road to
Maybe
hell
not
is paved
necessarily.
with good intentions. So,
But
and also, I have a question. Do you guys think violence is productive or counterproductive?
Whoa.
I think it depends on it largely depends on what the violence is and what it is in response to or what it's trying to accomplish. Just senseless violence, maybe not. But even then, I could still see a potential argument there. But
wait, what would you
in response to existing violence?
Oh God, I will stop you if you don't stop. Okay, I'm curious, Eli Monty, can you give me the example or the Steelman for the senseless violence and why that's okay?
I don't know. I guess it's kind of if the system itself is already violent and if the system itself is already an oppressive force, is any violence against said system, can any violence that upsets said system truly be something that is pointless? Even if we as a society or even if we as people kind of might view some of it pointless?
Well, you're confusing systemic.
I feel like that's a question we don't ponder enough, maybe.
It's because if you start doing this thing where I think it's you conflate systemic violence with direct or physical violence, you can justify anything, right? Farting in a lift is violence. It doesn't mean you get to kill the guy who does it. Or taxes are violence.
Well, I don't know if that's violent.
Well,
I don't know if farting, if farting is violent.
Taxes are violent. Actually, farting in a lift is violence. It's you're attacking someone else's senses against their will.
I mean, it's a normal bodily function, but people can just get over themselves.
Okay, do you think do you think taxes are a form of violence?
I think they're a form of maybe necessary violence because taxes are quite literally how we have a society and keep it running, and keep
stop
things
and search is violence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you get to kill the police officer. So violent, it depends on the kind of violence, and it's there's nothing untoward about this. Has been the case for ages. Sorry, go on.
That's why I said I could potentially see an argument for it. I didn't say necessarily for senseless or quote unquote senseless violence. I said I could potentially see an argument for it.
Yeah, it's really contextual, but that's what I guess that's where the argument would be.
Vigilante, get your thoughts in. What do you think?
MLK quote that literally perfectly sums up what we're talking about here. Riots are the language of the unheard.
True.
And I read his Birmingham jail letter before this debate because I imagined it would come up. He in that letter, he constantly stresses how he opposes violence. He's talking to, I think it was some Christians who were upset that they went to a luncheon but it was like white and black people who sat in the whites only area. And then he was basically saying like, no, I earnestly oppose violence. I think even he spoke about how when he's pushing like non-violent action, they even had like workshops called self-purification, where they would have workshops on how to go to a protest and like take a blow without retaliating because you'd
But
escalate into
also-
a riot. And also even like they would search people before marches to make sure no one had brought weapons. So like
But also,
MLK is very like,
not-
anti-riot. So yeah.
Well, it's not necessarily that that he still said though that riots are the voice of the unheard, or is the language of the unheard, because even though he was to some extent against violence, even though he was to some extent against violence, he still understood where it came from and largely criticized like white people for being critical of the violence, because he was basically saying like, you're not hearing, these people, and that's why they're doing that. But also later on, and as he continued throughout his activism, he grew more and more sympathetic and more understanding of people who did engage in violent
But did he
action.
ever advocate for it?
Even if he didn't. I don't think it's necessarily whether or not he advocated for it that's super important here, and more along the lines of like, did he at least understand it? Because him understanding the violence is in a way him also reaching across the aisle to those who don't understand it by not necessarily outwardly coming out and saying like, yes, let's go do more violence, but by saying like, you aren't hearing these people, because King knew that they were hearing, that everybody was hearing him, and he wanted to make sure that the people who weren't heard were still heard through him, which is why he said violence is, or riots are the language of the unheard, even if he largely opposed it.
So I have a question.
Yeah,
for the
because that's
moderators
about
on this
like that's just about like understanding the context. But I'm pretty sure even before he says that sentence, he says that he condemns the riots and the conditions that produce the riots with equal weight. So again, that's just like, there's a whole bit in the Birmingham jail area where he talks about like the difference between breaking a just law and an unjust law. Like breaking a segregation law by white and black people going to an area that's only reserved for whites would be like an example of that. But yeah, as far as the physical violence thing goes, as far as I know, it's always very like, you have to, you attack the conditions that produce it, but we're not really talking about that on its own. We're talking about the relationship between moderates and progressives, and
well,
seems to be
since we're talking about here, when it comes down to, I'm going to play my black card, okay? Since we're talking about Dr. Martin Luther King, and we're talking about his relation to moderates and particularly white moderates, and he openly talked about how he was not in agreement with white moderates and openly criticized white moderates for essentially not doing enough for the same communities that they say that they're allies for. He openly criticized white moderates heavily. And I think it's just kind of weird. And I'm not talking about you, Lonerbox, here. I think it's openly weird. I think it's really weird whenever like a lot of moderates, especially moderate white people, like to quote Dr. Martin Luther King, but don't like to quote Malcolm X, even though they both heavily criticized and both were heavily like, the white moderate is not necessarily our friend either, black people. So,
but that's why I think that's where you get into a position where, depending on where the Overton window is, moderate doesn't mean anything, because the moderates he's addressing in that letter are people who were upset because they broke a segregation law. I'm like, okay, fuck off. Like, I advocate for moderacy, but I'm thinking like that's okay to do that. But even in that letter, he says that. Sorry, one more thing. He says like that he even feels like there's a paragraph where he talks about how he feels like a moderate himself when he's stuck between like the hopeless sort of complacent side of the black community on one side and the other side that's gone down the like black nationalist route where they're like very pro riot and they see white people as an incorrigible devil.
I don't know.
So like,
I don't know.
Depending where the Overton window is.
I wonder if we should call him like a moderate for that, though, especially when he openly
as I understand it, he calls himself that in the.
No, but I'm saying it just depends on where you are, because like I'm very far left, but if I go in certain Twitter spaces like Twitter communists, I become a reactionary to them. Like it just depends on where you. And I think that's probably Sorry, go on.
Like I'm just saying, like in that sense, him being a moderate, I would say, is more along an interpretation of I can see both sides of that issue within the black community, but it was still largely like those movements, like all revolutionary black movements for the most part, have been radical, progressive, in many cases socialist, if not all cases socialist movements. He's just saying, like, in that particular circumstance of looking at the black people that want to do black nationalism and riot and all that stuff versus the black people that don't want to do that and want to do peaceful protests. He's kind of like torn between those two people.
Let me ask you something.
Well, I
there's a lot of-
want to. Vigilante has been wanting to ask a question.
Oh, you're right.
and
You're right.
Go
I
ahead.
want to give him
So-
the chance to do so. Go ahead.
This is something that me and Eli have talked about a couple times, and I want to ask the moderates on this panel a question. So, would you guys say that the civil rights movement would have been as successful as it was in America without the more violent aspects of like the Black Panther Party, Malcolm X, and everything, and that if it just had the more non-aggressive aspect of like MLK, if it didn't have the more violent aspect of it, do you think it would have been just as successful? And this is something that me and Eli have talked about before, so I already know Eli's answer, but
Well, he's not the moderate on the panel. You are asking the moderate, so I want to give Sansel and Victard and Loner a chance. Go for it. We'll start with Victard. Actually, I'm curious.
I mean, would it, it's a really crazy question to ask, kind of, but I think it would have been because it could have been more successful without the violence. More people could have listened. I think anytime there is violence, it's an escalation. Going back to the BLM riots, that was violence, but that was in response to a violent action by the police, right? And I think anytime there is violence, you start to see an escalating series of violent events until there really is no going back and no common ground, and it does resort to kind of picking a side. So in that case, it didn't happen, but I think with any case in history, I think the little violence that you can, or as little violence as you can have, that's the most beneficial route to take.
Sansel, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a way for us to know necessarily whether it would or wouldn't have been more successful. Like we can theorize and do alt history all day, but like if we look at the successful like social movements in the United States, the peaceful protests were definitely like a major player for why people kind of sided with black people during the civil rights movement. If we look at like the gay liberation movement, or like getting gay marriage passed or accepted in the United States, it was like almost entirely nonviolent, with the exception of like one riot that everyone wants to bring up and say that this was the reason, Stonewall. Everyone wants to say that this is the reason why gay people got their rights, but like overwhelmingly, it was all through peaceful electoral means. So I would point more towards precedent and the effectiveness of peaceful protest.
I want to give Loner a chance, and then we'll get to you, Ancom. Go.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel like more of a progressive than a moderate, but yeah, I think for like the Black Panthers, I'd be like, of course, like again, that's why violence is contextual. Like if you've got police who are just like far more than they do now, just like assaulting and beating the shit out of or killing black people like on a whim, then like of course you're gonna have to have like a the idea of like a vanguard militia group like getting involved in that. It's kind of natural. But yeah, like as far as I know, with the Black Panthers, like it wasn't just the violence; it was also like the children's programs and like the breakfast stuff and the community stuff. I don't really know, like. If I wanted to be like a really cheeky moderate, you could just say like, well, MLK got the legislation passed, not the Black Panthers. But then like, no, there's obviously like in that environment, obviously some violence is going to make sense. Even with BLM, I think like attacking the police precinct after George Floyd died was completely justified.
Do you?
So
Okay.
yeah, I think again, it just depends. But I think usually it feels like there are situations where you need people there to be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, just step back and like, okay, burning down a precinct, that's one thing. Why are you like torching a fucking, what was it, like a car dealership? Why are you doing that? why are there like white people burning like
fuck car society.
why are white people like trashing a shop that's owned by a black guy? I'm like, okay, fuck. Yeah, there's definitely a point where things go a little bit fucking crazy. But yeah,
Alright,
it's
so-
like, yeah, sorry.
Because he voted for Trump.
Interesting thing you brought up there, Loner Box, which was people blocking traffic. A lot of MLK's own protests did exactly that. His famous march from it was to Selma from, I can't remember where it came from. But anyways, that march was like, it was comprised tons of people and it blocked roads for miles. And like a lot of people, moderates, even some, some who are even a little bit farther to the left, are constantly, when they see protests that block roads in that way, they get very angry about it. But when MLK did the same shit, do you not think people got mad in the same way? And like we're seeing a lot of MLK's actions through, rose-tinted glasses. We're seeing it through the nostalgia of the past, rather than looking at it how the people of the time might have seen it. Because like, even with his, his more non-violent actions, like he still got a crap ton of pushback. The fact that he was assassinated, I think shows that as well as anything. Like, the man pissed off a lot of people despite being a non-violent activist. So like, do you think moderates have go farther than simply damn it, the word's escaping, denouncing violent action? Like, they will go so far as to denounce what is even a non-violent action.
Would you have, out of
the
curiosity, right?
definition of
Out of curiosity, did you support the truckers in Canada and the disruption that they did in their city?
No.
Did I?
No? Yeah, you. Yeah. It was a disruptive act. A lot of people spoke out against it.
I disagreed with the reason they were doing it, but the specific means they used, I have no problem with the means.
Okay.
I disagree with why they did it, but how they went about it, no, I see no problem.
That was perfectly acceptable. Perfectly
I will
right.
say as well, though. Sorry.
Yeah.
$5 from Muda Agarwal to say, yes,
Wait.
the famous MLK quote, white moderates be cringe AF. Okay,
Wait.
that's all I want to say.
Oh.
Go ahead.
It depends on when
Me?
when the white
Wait,
moderate
wait.
card. Sorry, go on.
I thought it was me.
It's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say, we also seem to forget that, like, when MLK died, like, his approval rating was like what, in like the low 30s or some shit. Like, he was like the most hated man in America when he died, and that was even after he kept advocating for less violent means. Even after he sympathized with the people doing the violence, all that shit, he was still the most hated man in America, because it was largely like, what he was talking about was unpopular for the time. But that doesn't necessarily make it, that doesn't necessarily mean that just because the thing that you're talking about at the time is unpopular, doesn't mean that you shouldn't push for it. And doesn't mean that you shouldn't, that radical, and in some cases violent action isn't necessarily needed to get that passed and to get that happening. So I mean, I think in all honesty, black people needed to put the fear of God into white people. So yeah, like that shit was, we really did need to put the fear of God into y'all. Y'all was clowning it on us.
Do you think that black people still need to put the fear of God into us?
I think y'all might need a little bit of a refresher course, like just a little tap,
So I like how he went from
what happened?
Like
sorry,
reasonable.
Just really quickly, what happened to the polling for BLM as soon as they started putting the fear of God into white people? It plummeted. But sorry, can I just
we went from something that I largely agreed with, and then you
largely a joke.
Largely a joke coming from the guy that said like he wanted to like murder cops to build more unions a couple of days ago. Okay, so
that's not what I think said. That is not what I said.
I mean, it's recorded on my stream, brother. Like I asked you multiple times to clarify. clarify, but
I
okay.
said,
Anyways,
I said that I don't care if cops get like murdered.
You said that
I don't give a
people
shit.
should be doing that, and you are also now saying that we need
Jesus.
to put the fear of God in white people. So like weird racial animus, like just like out of fucking nowhere. But okay, like
Wow, you
all
were
that
like,
Not
aside,
out
so
of nowhere.
bent
We
on
were talking
making-
about MLK and BLM. If the civil rights movement of the 60s and the BLM movement of 2020 didn't, as Eli says, put the fear of God into white people, I
put
don't
the
know
fear
what
of God
did.
into white people. What does that mean to you?
I
wanna ask
so
you
to me,
first,
I'm
Ancom.
assuming it means that that black people are fighting back against the oppression of the white supremacist system and showing
that
them
if you
that
don't
no,
do
they
something,
won't
then
fucking
what will
stand for
happen?
that bullshit anymore.
Okay, first of
Or
all,
what?
let's
Hold on,
just
Wick. I want to no. Let me drill this down, Wick. God damn you!
God
All right,
damn it.
okay. Ancom. So what would happen otherwise? When you say we're going to put the fear of God into white people, what does that mean after that?
Fuck around,
Well,
find out.
Yeah.
So to me, it means if they don't start seeing significant changes into how the legal and
Find out.
policing
Yeah,
systems
yeah, what
are,
happens?
then they will continue to fight back against that oppression
Okay, let me ask.
in
how?
whatever way they
How?
deem
How?
necessary.
He didn't say
escalate-
fight back
Go.
against the system. He said put the fear of God into white people.
Okay,
Well,
but
Yeah,
no,
because
no,
this-
no,
because
But we know what
like
you
the
want,
system-
Eli.
system-
That's why I'm
just
asking
understand
Ancom,
these
who's
are
fucking-
synonymous, please.
Stop. I'm curious, Ancom, specifically, right? When you say they escalate, they do more, where? So today, let's stick to today. Police reform gets stymied, doesn't pass, doesn't go. The problems that you see in the policing system continue to be there. Do you think it is justified for the black community to begin to commit acts of violence in order to terrorize and put the fear of God and coerce white people into making those reforms?
People are talking
I
just like
believe that they are already being terrorized and they are already having that all of that shit that you just mentioned done to them.
So you
They
think
are
it's
completely
okay for them to
justified
do-
in
okay.
responding in kind if that is what they deem necessary to liberate themselves from that oppression. Yes.
Well, you're talking in generalities, and it's so frustrating because even earlier when you were talking about MLK, you were talking about roadblocks, which again is civil disobedience. But you can say like we're rising up against the white supremacist system. Well, that can mean breaking a segregationist law, which I think everyone would be okay with today, or it means going into a fucking neighborhood of civilians and trashing their businesses and their homes. Like, you just talk about something specific. Like, if you're going to push the envelope, just say what you want to do and then justify it. But if you, as soon as you get into this like vague generality, like I don't really know where the fucking like what exactly is being advocated for, or if it's just like it just seems very like it's vague, and that's why I keep saying it's like where the Overton window is really matters, because even like fucking Mandela, right? Like he was very violent. The ANC were very violent all the way through the negotiations, but there are like Marxist Leninists and like far left groups in South Africa today that say he was a sellout. Because in those negotiations, he protected the property rights of Boer farmers who lived in the country. So, like, their rights were enshrined in the Constitution, which meant regardless of how you got the land, you kept it after 1994. People now say that was like sellout. That was moderate shit. That was like bootlicking. He should have deported them all to fucking the Netherlands. So I don't know. Just
two
like,
things. One, part of the reason that I don't go farther and into specifics is because Twitch TOS.
You don't want to get banned.
Right?
I'm
not gonna advocate for direct violent action.
You would if
and give
Toss wasn't though. If
specifics.
Toss wasn't stopping you, you would.
If Toss wasn't stopping
Okay,
me,
just
then
making
well,
sure.
I probably
And would you
wouldn't
do that
it
along
anyway,
racial lines
because
like
beyond
Eli?
Toss, there's also the
I mean,
US
same.
legal
I'd
system
probably
that,
be
you know,
a lot more
if I
unhinged.
were to say hypothetically that I was going to go burn down my local police precinct, that would be a problem legally, because then, law enforcement would come find me and lock me away.
No.
Second,
I said-
I'm
I
a
said-
white guy.
I said-
Look at this skin. Look at this skin. I am a white dude. There is no way in hell I'm going to either prescribe or predict what the black community believes to be necessary to achieve their own liberation. Okay?
Also, let's be real. With you being a white guy, they'd probably be like, we had no idea he harbored these views ever. We We weren't watching. We had no idea. Meanwhile, if I say, "Hey, yo, fuck 12," there's like 12 of them outside of my door.
No, wait. Okay.
Hold on. Wait. Look out your window right now. Are they there right now? You said fuck
Really?
12. Do you?
So
well,
one
you
of these
think
days-
that like
one of these
you
days-
you have such a victim complex, but then you want to
You
LARP as this
have
like fucking
Sansol.
revolutionary where you want to kill
Sansol.
cops
Sansol.
all the
Yes,
time.
Sansol.
You have no
One of these
No.
days-
The thing is,
one of these
he's
days
the
I'll understand humor.
LARPer. The LARPing. No, you
One of
say
these
it's a
days
joke
I'll
all the
understand.
fucking time, but you unironically advocate for violence every single time I
Sansol.
talk to you.
I demand you understand humor. Tickle that funny bone, young man.
Okay, so do you
Seriously,
think?
right
Do you
now.
wait? Hold on.
Get a dictionary,
Let me drill
look up
down.
the
Let me
definition-
hold on.
Oh my
the
God.
definition
Yeah.
of
You can
cocaine.
defend him all
Let
you
me know
want,
when
but
you're
let me
done.
ask
I'm
the
gonna
question.
And that's
put
what
this
the
ball in the
defend-
sink. Let me know when
you
you're
can
done.
defend him all you
I'll
want,
be
but-
back, right? Give me a
Okay,
second.
well-
Give me a second.
Okay, well,
Let me-
I was
let me-
just gonna
let me know
ask
when you're
him
done.
what would happen
Let me-
if,
let me-
like, if I was to ask him, do you think that cops should be like murdered?
shit.
Like, would you say yes or no? Well, given the fact that he said that on this stream and on a personal conversation with us, like he is either going to lie here.
There's a
or he's-
difference, Sansol. There's a difference between saying cops should be murdered and saying I
He
don't
said that
care
he would
if
get a
cops
gun
are...
himself and do it.
Shut the fuck up. Let me finish, for God's sake. There's a difference
I brought the
between
ball back
saying
to be petty.
cops should be murdered and I don't care if cops are murdered.
He said
Very
they should
specific
be.
difference between those, and he said the latter,
Okay.
not the
Okay.
former.
I want to get to.
Okay, well,
Bridges
there's a
of Blanket
question
is
then.
really
Well,
good food.
again, you don't
Go
have to
ahead,
be
Love-
again. You don't.
Lover.
Yeah, people don't. You don't have to be cowards. Okay, I said that burning down the precinct was justified in a video game. You can dance around these points to make your position clear. I can explain why, like, breaking segregation law made sense. I can explain why, like, ANC violence against the apartheid state in South Africa made sense. There are times where you can say violence not only is understandable, but is actually pragmatically the right thing to do. Right? I can explain why fucking Ukrainians being violent against Russians invading their country is just, so you don't need to dance around this. Like, if you're going to say like, I don't care if a cop dies or whatever the fuck else
I
you're saying,
don't.
that's TOS. Well, okay. Do you think it helps?
Huh?
You think it helps if a cop gets murdered?
Do I think it helps when a cop gets murdered?
Yeah.
I mean, the way I see it, it's
Let's say a
one less
BLM
person
person does it.
that could potentially murder me. So I'm like, eh.
Oh no, people can join
way
the
I see it-
cops. Like it means there's a job
The
opening.
way I see it, it's the way I see it, it's one less bullet that's gonna come from me. So I mean, you know,
It's a job opening
let me
for
put it
someone
this
who's
way.
really
What I-
fucking mad that one of their fellow boys in blue just got murdered by some dipshit.
So
or
let me put it this way.
it's
I'd be a lot
hold on.
less.
Wait, hold on.
Okay.
It's
All right.
it's real quick quip. Or it's a job opening for somebody like my friend who I graduated high school with to change, who wants to change the system. Hey, silver lining to every cloud sandwich, whatever.
Yeah, so
Okay,
that's
I
what
wanna-
happens.
I wanna-
If
Let
a
me put
cop
it this
gets
way.
if a cop gets murdered, the police department will be like, "Yeah, we need to get an employee. What kind of employee? Well, let's get a nice empathetic cop. You know, after one of our cops has just been murdered. You know what fucking human beings are like, right? Jesus.
Yeah.
Wait,
I
aren't all
think I
cops
would prefer
bastards?
that cop be taken off the street via a different means, but I agree with Eli that at least for a short amount of time, there is one fewer person on the streets who presents a clear and present danger to people of color.
Exactly why
Wait,
progressives
can I
will never get any
wait,
power,
wait,
right?
do
I
you
want to
think-
get some of the quieter people in here.
You guys are the exact
I
reason.
want to give Vigilante a chance, please.
I just want to say
that's
these are the
something to
exact
know.
like
Well,
these are case studies right here in why progressives are so unpopular in the United States. Why radicals are so unpopular in the United States, because you guys have no fucking clue what the average fucking person believes about cops, what the average fucking person believes about like social change. You guys are unironically okay with like violent measures as nearly a first order like solution to every fucking problem.
Having a
I've
different
met
opinion
very few
doesn't mean that
pro-cop
I
people.
don't know what moderates think about these issues. I know exactly what they think and why they think it. I disagree with them, and part of the reason that I do these kinds of panels and I do education at all is because I know why they think it, and I'm hoping to find a way to convince them, to bring them to the more
and if they
progressive
don't,
side.
then what happens?
Advocating for violence is
Victor,
the best way
Victor,
to-
we're going to get to you in a second, but I have a question for Incom.
Cool.
Do you think that someone who does not want cops to be murdered and thinks it's bad if a cop's be murdered, does that fit the definition of moderate? Am I a moderate because I think, hey, killing cops is not okay?
I think
Nah.
that is a moderate opinion, and I think it's one that I
Good to
would
know.
I would like to have a conversation about why you believe that, and perhaps change your mind.
I will say,
Victor,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, I just want to say really quickly. The idea that you shouldn't murder cops, that it would be bad to murder cops, is like you can be a progressive and hold that position. Murdering cops
Right.
is not like it's okay to murder cops,
I don't think,
because
wait,
it'll
I
make
don't
the
think, I don't think
because
Steve's
it'll
saying
make
you're
the
not progressive by holding that
because
opinion.
yeah, but
It's
not like
I,
moderate
I
one.
said
The
the opinion
idea-
itself is moderate.
Yeah.
Holding one moderate opinion does not necessarily make you a moderate. A
No,
person with
it's
that
not the
opinion
moderate
could be far
opinion.
right. A
No, no.
person with that opinion could be far left. It is a single opinion.
No, it's not the moderate position. It's also the progressive position. Across most of America, across most of the fucking world, the progressive position is also murdering cops. Probably not a good thing. I don't even think Malcolm X would say it's okay to just murder a fucking cop.
I don't think
You
that's
know
how.
why?
I don't think that's how
Because he's not
progressive-
white
I don't
enough.
think-
Like that's why.
just because something is popular doesn't necessarily mean it's progressive. But yeah,
How do we
each their
decide what's
own.
progressive if not like for like Overton window and popularity? If there's like one person out
Because-
there who thinks like yeah we should just murder all the cops.
So let's say you know, let's say stoning gay people, right?
Mm.
Let's say that comes back as like it's all of a sudden a lot of people want to stone gay people, right? Does that make it a progressive opinion because it's really popular?
Not because progressive, not because it's popular, but like if like let's say like not like 90% of people said
Right,
that
thanks.
you should stone people for being gay, and then there were people somewhere in the middle who said no, you should only stone them if they've like I don't know if they've done like 5 orgies, then that would be the
I'm
moderate
asking-
position.
wait,
Yeah, it
wait,
depends on
maybe-
context.
maybe-
Yeah, what's right wing now?
So it's
like
so you
This
would
is a
you
moderate
so
position.
only if it's a popular thing is it progressive.
no, not if it's popular.
No.
Is it progressive? It depends on what everyone believes, and then you find like
could've
what's on the
sworn that's
left.
what you
What's
said. I could've
no.
sworn that's what you said at first.
I know, but
It-
okay, like it's really, really simple. Back in the day, right? It was probably like
No, I got you,
progress-
fam. It's
again,
okay.
It was
Got you.
progressive. The really progressive thing back in the day was to say that women can vote, right? Because most people probably didn't believe that.
Right.
And then
yeah.
eventually it became the more moderate position. Now it's a default position. Like what's
Yeah.
progressive and what's right wing both change over time, not depending on who's
But-
popular.
Well, it just sounded like that's what you said at first. I could have sworn it sounded like you said that it's if something's popular or whatever. Or I asked about something and you said, is that not the popular position? I'm like, does that make it progressive just because it's popular? I just want a clarification.
No,
for
I'm
that.
saying in the context of the United States.
Stop,
like, okay.
stop. We are getting into the minutia, which is obfuscating what is being claimed here, that killing and murdering police officers is apparently a progressive position that progressives, right, should
I
hold.
want to clarify.
Right?
I want to
Stop.
clarify.
Nope. We're gonna go to Victard because Victard's been waiting. Then we're gonna go to Vigilante, and Vigilante's been waiting. Right?
all right.
I don't want to get into this obfuscating. I want to be very clear on what is being advocated here for, so it can be addressed. Go ahead, Victard,
Right.
please.
I think anytime you're talking about murdering anyone, that's a pretty radical solution to a problem. I also think that anytime that we as human beings start to resort to violence, however controlled it might be in the beginning, there becomes like a line that we cross where like our overriding animal nature seems to take over, and you start to see uncontrolled things. This is happening right now in Ukraine in situations where there are war crimes being committed. It happens in almost every like violent, like continued violent event. And I think that we should be doing everything that we can to not advocate for violence as a means to solution, because it's not effective in a long-term solution. And I think violence is really rolling the dice once you cross that line, because the person who has you're not going to have a resulting situation in where the person who has the correct moral opinion wins. You're going to have the resulting whoever is the most effective at being violent wins. And you could take regressive steps in society. Say, oh, I'm progressive and I think we should start, murdering police in video games. And then all of a sudden, all the progressives are now we start passing laws. Let's round those people up and put them in jail. And then that movement stagnates. So I don't think advocating for violence is a effective, good, or something that we should be like striving for, especially in this current day and age. I think that's going backwards.
Vigilante, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to address something that Sonsol said about how people don't like progressives because we advocate for violence. Sonsol, me and
Can
you
I
have
be,
talked
like, ultra
a couple
clear?
times.
Can
Go ahead.
I be ultra clear? I'm talking about like the radicalism, not necessarily just violence, because I think that like even conservatives will like sit there and like jerk off over 1776. So like obviously people believe at some point in the possibility of a violent revolution, but that's not what we're like really talking about here, right?
We're kind of suspending disbelief when we say moderate progressive, right? Because I think I'm quite progressive. Sonsol, you seem quite progressive. This is like progressive versus like fringe batshit only on Twitch. Like you got fucking, sorry, no disrespect, but you've got like a fucking hammer and USSR flag behind you. You know, that's like, that's not progressive. That's like fringe, far left. But yeah, anyway. Whatever.
Well, I mean, centrist, in reality, centrist is, SOCDEMs are centrist. In the
No, they're not. Like
global scale.
And the global
What?
scale, like on the global scale,
I mean, yeah.
does that mean on the global scale, like I don't know,
America's pretty
where
far
you've got like
behind.
where you've got like radical Islam across like 1 or 2 billion people? How is SOCDEM like? Why do you think that? Why is SOCDEM like?
Yeah, I want to give Vigilante
The
a
far
space
right-
to elaborate on this because I'm curious too. Vigilante, please explain. You have the floor.
The far right is like fascism or anarcho-communism. The far left is, anarcho-capitalism. The far left is like communism or anarcho-communism. The center between those two would be SOCDEM.
It's not
Yeah, so
far
why
left
are
and
we-
far
it's
right,
not a-
and there's
it's not
just a
a-
giant middle.
It's not
It's
just
a
a
spectrum.
line.
So why are we letting this
It's a
Overton
huge
window get
spectrum.
It's not
dragged
a-
by
it's
fucking?
not a line.
So why are we letting the Overton window of this conversation get dragged by like fucking Sudan and like and like places that aren't anything to do with what we're talking about? So are SOCDEMs in the United States, are they moderate? Or are they left? Would you say SOCDEMs?
In
I mean,
the
you can
United
s-
States,
you
they're
can say
left.
United
Okay,
States,
that's
but
fine,
like
that's all
we're
I
still behind. We're still behind. Like
Compared to
the
who?
the
Saudi
majority
Arabia.
The
of
rest of the
other.
world?
The majority of the rest of the world, especially like the majority of like other countries that are on similar levels to us.
Like
You know
Europe,
what I
is
mean?
what you're saying?
Like,
Like,
The
We're-
developed
Yeah.
world,
America,
let's say.
Okay.
Developed,
Fair enough.
maybe more like
Okay,
the
the Western world.
Compared
Let's say
to Europe,
the Western world.
Canada, yeah, compared to the rest of the Western world,
First world
America's
industrialized
sig-
countries.
yeah, America is significantly behind politically.
but that would make SOCDEMs even
But-
that would make SOCDEMs even less moderate and more left by your standard, then, right?
we said in America. We were talking about like we admit that like in America it might be, but we were just saying like on a global scale, in a global sense, not really. We're like pretty far behind in
So
comparison to
cops
the
should
rest of
only
the
be
world.
killed in America and not in like the UK or Norway. Is that what
I
it
mean,
is?
It's because America's policing system is significantly more violent than that of most other countries.
If we're going with
Yeah,
if we're
that
going
are
if we're going with the
militarized-
world,
economic
though.
Thank you for acknowledging that, Sansol. Thank you
If
for
we're going
acknowledging that.
if we're going with the world, America's police system is progressive as fuck. What compared to like Africa or like the Middle East
Ow,
or fucking
China,
China and shit?
Russia.
Like, yeah.
I did
Right.
How is it that we-
on
wait, we
economic
started-
par
let's look
with
at
the US,
India.
didn't I?
You
Wait,
think
we
that the
started
wait,
comparing-
Wait. Do we think that the police
We
system
started-
in India is worse or better than America?
Wait, hold on. I just want to point out how this conversation just like flip flopped. Like at first we were talking about like the Western world, and then what's his name? Lonerbox was like, why are we letting the Overton window of this conversation be dragged by like Sudan or some shit? And then you guys wanted to get into the framework of only talking about the Western developed world, what have you. Now all of a sudden we're going to like India and other countries like that aren't as developed as.
I only said
Like
it
what?
because Vigilante said that SOCDEMs are like centrists in a global context.
Yeah,
they
even
are.
even in comparison to countries that are like, even when we compare ourselves to countries that are on a similar like economic standpoint as us, like it is true.
Aren't most like countries in the world kind of more going down the neoliberal road than SOCDEM? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is
No,
completely-
we are the ones going down the more neoliberal road. But then when you compare us to like Scandinavian countries and shit, like Scandinavia, in these countries, they've eliminated homelessness.
Yeah. Okay. So
Like
now,
they've
okay, so
eliminated
now we're,
homelessness.
yeah.
And
Okay.
they basically like people that they go to prison, like they make it out, and then when they get out, They don't go back in. Like, holy shit.
No, I know Scandinavia is more progressive than America. Yeah, I know. I don't know if we're talking
Yeah,
about the
like,
world
we-
or the
However,
developed world or
vastly
the Western
different
world.
society than
Scale,
America.
Oh god.
The Overton window on a global scale is much wider than the Overton window within the US. And when you compare the two, the global scale versus the American scale Overton windows, the American window is shifted to the right
Okay, I
pretty
got some money.
significantly.
Some people are paying me money to ask you questions, so I'm going to ask the questions. Can you ask the progressives? Okay, so this is for you, Eli, Vigilante, and Ancom.
Income.
Yep. Once the ideologies of their opponents are gone, where they will be on the Overton window. So once we eliminate the cops and the Republicans and the moderates, and it's just progressives, right? Where will you be on the Overton window, and will you accept the consequences if you are deemed no longer being progressive enough?
I feel
There
like
is a
personally-
quote that I
Paid
remember.
question, not mine.
Sorry, there is a quote that I remember hearing a while back. I don't remember who said it originally, but it went something along the lines of, "I dream of a world in which I would be put to the wall for being too reactionary."
What?
Yes. Yes. I dream for that world. But I do want to say my
Go
response to that question is
Please.
I would like to believe that I have put myself in a position to where I never stop learning, because I think that a lot of people who hold more conservative opinions are people in many cases who have closed their minds off to other or newer ideas. We see this in the way in which, conservatives are oftentimes really rail against education and say it's super liberal and all this other type of dumb shit or whatever. Like I would like to believe, and I would hope that 80-year-old me remembers what 26-year-old me said, that you never stop learning and you never stop trying to be accepting of things, even if you're not 100% certain as to how they affect you.
So Eli, I wanna dig in on both of these responses, please. But I want to give Vigilante space first. But please, after I really want to ask all of you a question. Go ahead, Vigilante, answer the question if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not perfect, but I always try to educate myself and update my opinions constantly. So, I mean, if I ever get to the point where I'm either the moderate or the progressive or the conservative, I mean, I would definitely accept that. But I mean, I would love to see that world.
Okay. Question first, then to Ancom, Psycom. You dream of a world where you are so reactionary that you will get the wall. Can you
I want to point out that's
elaborate?
largely hyperbole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Largely hyperbole. How is it not? Let's set the hyperbole aside, reason
Okay.
together one with another, and be honest and be open.
Okay.
And just be
All right,
clear
all right.
with what you're
So-
advocating for here, or what you want
All right.
here.
So the world that I want to see is, and just to kind of get ahead of anyone, is a world that I doubt I will see in my lifetime, but it's something worth striving for. Now, as the other two said, there is a constant process of learning and understanding and trying to better yourself as you better your society. So I'm looking for a world in which the opinions that I have today would be considered outmoded, outdated, reactionary. And that's fine, because I hope to be a person who continues to learn and progress and evolve, just as the
Sure.
society that I am in
Then
is
this
learning,
is-
progressing,
yeah.
and evolving.
And then to all of you then, and I'll let you all answer this question. Do you ever think we can go too far with progressivism? That there is a point where you would say, hey, this is too much. We have gone beyond the veil. We need to stop.
Well, if you're putting people
Probably,
against the
but
wall for what they
yeah,
believe, then you're kind of going in a full circle and you're not really progressive anymore. So yeah, I think that's the point.
Yeah,
I feel like,
again, that was hyperbole. It wasn't meant to be literal.
so listen,
So
I know you guys, I've noticed the theme of you guys love the edgy humor. It makes me that. I feel like there's maybe a channel you guys would be interested in. I maybe recommend you maybe check out cozy.tv after this if you want those good fucking ironic edge memes. that thinly veil your real positions. But fuck,
So we don't actually know what edgy means.
like
Got
I'm
it.
not like
Interesting.
I'm not really like a progressive for its own sake. The progressive ideas make more sense to me. If what's everyone's calling progressive is like makes the world worse, then I wouldn't
You
be
laughed in
progressive
the
anymore. It
face
just
of your last
depends.
interlocutor on this issue.
Yeah, if if progressivism is going too far, then I would submit that it's no longer progressive and it becomes harmful, because like the idea of progressive as a movement is we're trying to change the world in a way that makes things better for as many people as possible. So if suddenly that is becoming harmful in such a way that that many or a large number of
Got
people are being harmed by that without any
ask-
any significant benefit to the rest of society, and like even that's kind of questionable,
Sansel.
because Sansel, go ahead.
Yeah, Sansel, right?
So
Out
I
of
think that-
curiosity, no, I was a very specific
Yeah.
question for you, right?
yeah, so I was
Um,
going to answer. Or is this a new question?
It's a new question for
Uh-oh.
you.
Oh.
Okay. Based on the responses given, right? Do you think that progressivism as encapsulated by Eli Monty, Ancom Psycom, and Vigilante, do you think it's helpful or harmful? Do you think they are actually doing harm with the way, with what
yeah.
they are advocating for and the way they are advocating for it?
I think that they're hurting any like progressive movement that they advocate for, with the exception of Vigilante. Vigilante seems to be, and from my conversations with him, a pretty like reasonable person. I don't know if he, co-signs everything that's said. In regards to the
Wait, let's check. Vigilante, do you co-sign what's being talked about by Eli Monty and Ancom when it comes to cops?
I mean, I don't completely disagree. Like, I mean,
So
I wouldn't
you're
say
okay
go
with
out
it.
there. I wouldn't say go out there and kill cops, but
Sure,
I mean,
but
I'm
you wouldn't
not
cry over
exactly.
it, right?
I don't exactly
didn't say that
cry
either,
whenever a
but for the
cop's
record.
killed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You wouldn't.
I
you
don't think
wouldn't
anyone
shed a
on this
tear, you
panel
wouldn't
is saying that
care.
it's a good thing to go out and kill cops. We're just saying we don't necessarily
It's
mourn
morally
a cop's
neutral
death.
to you.
Well, I feel like that goes like
I mean-
completely in contradiction with what you said earlier.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to
What
answer
did I
the
say
question that you
earlier?
said. It seemed like you were saying that, yeah, like violent revolution is like absolutely
That you would
100% okay.
advocate for violent.
Yeah. Yeah, but I just
never
wanted
said
to
the
quickly
words
answer.
violent revolution.
Okay,
I
when
never
you're
once
talking
said
about
the
like
word violent revolution.
when
Would
you
it be
talk
more of
about
a
like
cozy
killing
revolution
cops-
if we're using euphemisms?
Okay, I just
You can
really wanna-
advocate for a
I don't
cozy
want to get.
revolution.
I don't want to
I'm
get
not
like so.
talking even euphemistically about a violent revolution. That is something that if it is necessary, then it's going to happen. But I would rather find a non-violent way to do that. But I'm also not going to tell
Yeah.
people, like, if that's what becomes necessary, that no, they can't do that.
I just
but
wanna
you said
say
earlier that like if a cop
I'm
gets
just gonna go
killed,
ahead.
it's sorry, go on.
I do want to say, because I didn't get to answer the question, and I really wanted to answer the question.
I thought you did. I thought you said that.
No.
I thought you said you were
I also
always
wanna
trying
answer
to be
that question.
learning and things. You went on for a while.
No, it was wow, that was a while. I was also, well, you said, is there anything that is too much, or were you just specifically
that
asking that?
question. I thought you meant the other question. No, fair
Yeah,
enough. Go ahead. Eli.
Yeah, I wanted to answer that. I was gonna say that I don't know because we haven't gotten there yet. That's it.
Okay.
I like
Loner,
that answer.
You had something to say. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
You're talking to me.
Loner.
Oh.
Loner.
What was it?
You were interrupted. You were saying something, and then Eli interrupted you. Finish your thought.
Oh shit.
Yeah, sorry, Lona. Go ahead.
Okay.
If you forgot
It was just
we can,
it was just
Sansa wants to
because
talk to you.
because earlier you guys were saying that if a cop dies, it's one less guy on the street who can like murder black people. Then I would
Yes,
ask,
absolutely.
why isn't it a good thing then that you would advocate for if that's like you want to leave them out there murdering black people? Like, whatever, it's okay. I don't think either of you will answer that question. So it's
wait, because also not all cops are bad. Like that
True.
is true. Not all cops are bad. Like I said, I graduated high school with someone who is now a cop. And I would like to believe that my friend who I graduated high school with, who is now a cop, is a good dude. I also, one of my best friends was considering, he was thinking about becoming
Yeah.
a cop. So he's fairly certain good, fantastic dudes. However, it's like the analogy of the snakes on the other side of the door, right? Like, I can't tell the difference between the good ones and the bad ones. I can't tell the difference at first glance. So as a result, I always have to have, and I always have to have this mindset, and I always have to make sure that when I'm driving down the road, even when I'm going speed limit and obeying all traffic laws, I drive in the center of the road. Because I've trained or told myself, it's probably not even true, that it's easier or it's harder. It would be harder for me to get pulled over if I'm driving in the middle of the road as opposed to on the other two lanes where the cop could be on the shoulder. Even though, again, like I said, probably stupid for me to believe, but that makes me feel safer. I always make sure that all my tags, everything, I freak out if I even think that my shit might be out of date. I see lights behind me, not even for me, but for somebody else. I freak out. Like, that's the reality
Does
I
that
live
help
in.
you?
So no, it doesn't. It probably doesn't help me, but it's a response to trauma. It's a response to this fear that I have. So for people to look at me and try to paint this in a bad light and try to say that I'm insane or some shit because I don't give a fuck when a cop gets like downed or whatever. Like, honestly, you can go fuck yourself. I don't care. Sorry, this is the reality I live in.
No, we're gonna go to other people first. We're gonna get Victard in. We're gonna get Sansel in. Victard, go ahead, respond.
What was the question? Which
it
one am
wasn't
I
a
answering?
question. You look like you have shit to say. I'm giving
I
you
was
space.
looking some stuff up.
I'm not firing into the cop
Okay,
shit.
go ahead, Ancom.
Not today.
All right. So all I wanted to say is that this is one point I will disagree with Eli on, which is I do think all cops are bad. I think the entire policing system as a whole is corrupt to its core, and anyone
I agree with that,
voluntarily anyone who voluntarily participates in that system is not a good, helpful, or I can't think of another adjective, but is not a good person, because like, even if they don't understand, like, and yeah, there's plenty of ignorance out there about the corrupt nature of the police, but like, they're still participating in a system that is innately harmful. Now, I don't want to see cops killed. I would much rather see cops retire, because the only good cop isn't one. Meaning, like, either they have stopped being a cop, or in the in the less fortunate case, they have passed away. I don't want to see cops die. I don't particularly have any strong emotions when I see that a cop was killed, but I don't want to see them die. I want to see the modern system of policing abolished, and for cops as they currently exist to no longer exist.
I have a question. If that system were to get abolished, and
Yes.
things and the murder rates go up, and other crimes against other people goes up because there is no police force, what would you do then?
Why do you assume that there's no system? Why do you assume?
Oh, then
No,
what else would you
I'm
put in
saying-
place?
There's the question.
What else would you
See-
put in place?
In my vision, like, the idea is that communities will take responsibility for their own
Stop,
safety
Maritzi.
in a much more
Stop.
democratic and distributed way. Like, everyone should be responsible for the safety of a particular
So,
community.
like on the subway, right? That recently
Yeah.
happened. Is that what you're looking at? Okay, cool.
Like
Hmm.
untrained
that was a great
civilians
point.
taken into their own
Yeah.
hands.
Wick, with
That was
all
a
due
great
respect,
point.
what the actual fuck?
Okay, y'all
Again,
are
if you were actually like advocating for
Argument
like
ad absurdum.
non-police
There's a
community-
difference. Okay, there's a difference between a lone vigilante acting on his own and then a group, like a system that has been created, a new system that is different from policing, but that has been created by a group consensus, what's it called? The consent of a community. Like,
Let me put it this way.
Like,
Like
blows
a
me-
lynch
it
mob.
blows me away that
I just want to know.
Hold on,
I just want to know
hold on.
how such a stupid take was
I want to address
engineered.
Wick's,
How is this
I want
stupid
to
take?
address
When
Wick's
you have
example
the
directly.
community policing itself, that is what it looks like. Untrained individuals.
A well-regulated,
No,
well-regulated,
you are
not
so
lone
incredibly wrong.
vigilantes. That is
All right.
so hypocritical, and that is
Let
so
me
disingenuous
define.
and dishonest.
Fine, because you guys want to go into the nitty gritty, right? I'm trying to keep it, high level conceptual here, but I'm happy to dive down into this if that's where Wick wants to go. So you gave the example of the man who was killed in the New York City subway by the Marine. I have forgotten all
Someone
names
who was
involved in that
trained,
case.
right?
Yeah. So first of all, in the system that I am looking for, I said specifically to democratize and distribute the protection of the community, which means people who are actively in the act of protecting the community are directly accountable to both the people that they are that they are considered to be protecting, as well as anyone that they might interact with in that instance. So the fact that someone so let's put it this way. If the man who had subdued and killed the person on the subway, if he had been instead of a retired or discharged Marine, I believe, if he had been an on-duty police officer, exact same actions, there would be significant community outcry, and there would be no way to hold that cop accountable, largely because of, in the U.S. policing system, the issue of what is it called? Qualified immunity, right? There would be almost no chance that any charges would have been brought up
I
on
don't
that
think
cop.
that's true.
It's not
Yeah, I
quite
don't think that's true at
I don't
all.
think that's
how
true
That's
qualified
not-
immunity works,
whatsoever.
right?
I
Y'all
think
don't
the
understand
chokehold. I
qualified
think that the
immunity then.
chokehold. Didn't the
Jesus.
chokehold that the Marine used? Isn't that the exact same chokehold that was banned because of George Floyd or
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
of the BLM? Okay, so
If
Okay,
a cop had done that,
so
he would have
if-
been charged.
he
right?
would have been
Alright.
fired. He would have been charged with murder.
We
I
see
mean,
this in the results.
The
We
Marine
saw
wasn't
this-
charged with murder.
and-
He was charged
No,
with
he's been
manslaughter.
but he's been charged with manslaughter, and it's like the progressives. You want to abolish the police, and then as soon as somebody does something like that, oh, we got to protest in the streets until this guy's arrested by who? The police, to go through what? Our judicial system. So, but you want to abolish all that, and then you have the hubris to think that whatever you can come up with
I mean, it's here.
is
We might as
not
well
going to
still
have
use
any
it.
problems. It's going
Well,
to be a
no,
perfect
that's
system.
not. Wait. No, since when did we say that our systems are going to be flawless and not have any problems? Obviously, nothing's perfect, and these are going to have those problems. But we still need to go and start somewhere. Right
I want
now,
something
where
that's
we're-
better.
We are
Yeah,
starting
we want something
somewhere.
better.
We
See how
are
that
starting
doesn't mean it's
somewhere. We're
that
doing
doesn't mean it's
police
going
reform
to be
right now.
flawless.
We're doing police reform right now. We are taking action.
The problem is
I think
the
the problem is
police
I think the
reform-
problem is that you want to make change happen in your lifetime, and you're so focused on that you lost sight of the fact that
would like
systemic
to,
change
yeah.
is slow.
I already
Systemic
mentioned that I
systemic
doubt
change-
it's going to happen in my lifetime.
Systemic change
Did you not
is
hear that
slow.
part?
It's not
No
going to
shit.
happen in your lifetime. But I think that overall, since 1950, I think that we live in a more progressive, better America than we did back then.
Really? Do we?
Do we not? You really
Before
don't
the
think
Civil
we do?
Rights Act, yeah,
I mean,
probably.
very,
Yeah.
very marginally. I mean, a lot of there's
Because
still-
change
there's-
is slow. Change is slow. You're right. Change is slow. It's very
Wait, no,
marginal.
wait,
But in
wait,
another
no,
50
no,
years,
no,
In some ways it's better, in
another
some
50
ways it's
years,
worse.
I bet
Can we
you
need
it's
to
going to be
ask-
even better.
I want to raise of hands. I want to show because I'm curious. Do we think that it is only marginally better for minority communities and policing in general? Do we think that's only marginally better today than it was, let's say, the 70s or the 60s, right?
Yes.
Well, show of hands. So one from Eli Monte, Ancom,
Damn.
Vigilante.
Yes.
Jesus Christ, that's insane.
I mean, are y'all ready to get into this shit? Y'all want to get into the weeds?
Do you
I
think
mean, I have
MLK
time
should
if
have?
you guys have
Do you
time.
I got time.
think? Do you think
let's
MLK
do
should
it.
have
We
called
have
it?
some-
Hey, do you think MLK should
minutes,
have called
all
it
the
the
time in the
fucking?
world.
Do you think MLK should have called it the Marginal Rights Act? Sorry.
Okay.
So just because the Civil Rights Act is a thing does not necessarily mean that this shit still isn't going on, or that it's not going on behind the scenes, or not being televised.
No, that wasn't the
and what have
question.
you.
The question was
So-
whether or not it's marginal. Because we said 50s.
Yes, yeah,
before Civil Rights Act.
that's what I'm talking about that right now. I'm talking about how it's marginal because, okay, so what has progressed? Because I've been thinking about this lately, right? What has actually progressed, or what has actually gotten better in America? Gay people are kind of seen as a little bit better, and black people are we don't necessarily the whites only and black only signs are just no longer there anymore. But we can still see the division between communities. We can still see the rapid onset, or not onset, but the rapid displacement and impoverishment of black and brown people. We can still observe these things. Just because they're not, just because there's more consequences for when people do these things doesn't necessarily mean that these things are just poof, they no longer exist.
Gay people were getting sterilized in the 50s. What the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
So now we're treating them.
So now we're treating marginalized communities like they're somewhat people. Like, okay, like you could say
Do you
that's
really think
better,
that people
but it's
don't
not
see
much.
gay people as human beings?
To quote Malcolm X, if you stick the knife 9 inches in my back and pull
Thank
it out
you.
6 inches,
Thank you.
Have you made it, or is it better?
So
Yeah,
so
you- that is-
wait,
you
just
can't
hey,
just-
hang
that
on,
is
hang on,
the
no.
comparison here.
Right, so
You can't-
stopping sterilization.
No, hold on, because I gotta finish the quote. I gotta finish the quote.
But
You can't just pull the knife out. You can't just stick a knife in there and pull out 6 inches and say progress. You can't even just pull it all the way out and leave a gaping hole there. That's still
the
not
first step to
progress.
putting a bandage on is pulling the knife out, is it not?
Yes, but to say
Okay,
that that's
so because
progress,
then-
that's not. I wouldn't say that's
It's
not-
literally
Yeah, but-
progress.
Okay, no,
In a literal
hold
sense,
on,
but
because
like-
if you pull the
Finish the
if
quote.
you pull
It's
the
not
knife
progress
out,
of the world.
if you pull the knife
Wait, no.
out and don't put the bandage on, you bleed to death.
But the society isn't a
Pulling
human
the
being,
knife
bro.
out while unnecessary
Society
putting
isn't a
the
fucking
bandage
human
on
being.
cannot be considered
It's called an
progress in
analogy.
itself.
Okay, if you look,
A metaphor.
I'm gonna keep going because this is
I
interesting.
don't even know what the fuck
Two
to
things.
say here,
Two
dude.
things,
Like, if you
though.
don't,
I know a
I-
couple of you
So just be
might have
quiet.
to go, so I want to give you
Yeah.
space to have an outro. I know Sansol has to go, and a couple more people went in that I'm thinking of bringing in, unless anyone has objections. We got
sure.
Let 'em in.
Countering Politics and President Sunday in the waiting. So if any of you have objections to either of those people, let me know. But I
I'm
know
interested to hear what President Sunday has to say.
I'm curious too.
Good to know that
Damn, the President
sterilization
Sunday's in
counts
there?
for 3
Fuck
inches
me.
of blades. Jesus Christ.
Do you want to stay, Sansol?
I can't.
Go ahead,
Unfortunately,
Sansol. Give us your closing outro, and then we will pull those in and continue this discussion.
Yeah. This has been a panel. This has been a I honestly thought that we were going to talk more about like progressives in the United States. Instead, we got a whole bunch of really hyper mask off statements from Eli Monty. I'm actually, I almost can't. I respect it almost because they're not trying to like hide until we called them on it and then they try to like walk everything back. But like I can appreciate the honesty in the mask off statements. You guys are exactly the reason why there will never be, at least in the current iteration of progressive politics, there will never be a progressive movement in the United States.
Okay.
Until people like you guys shut the fuck up and stop being so goddamn fucking crazy with the things that you guys say and believe, no one will ever listen to a goddamn thing you guys think.
Or you can
Okay.
get the fuck out of my way.
Okay.
Oh, or I can get the fuck out of your way. Yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna get the fuck. Wait, hold on, wait. I will respond to that shit. Fuck you. I'm not gonna get the fuck out of your way because
fuck
your
you.
way is going to fucking like kill people all over the fucking place. But as evidenced by what you said in this fucking stream, you fucking retard.
Sansol.
Whoa.
We're gonna let you go.
Hey, I potentially have autism. I take offense to that.
Bye. Okay.
I do
Okay,
have autism.
okay.
Fuck you, Sansol.
Beautiful. So Pondering Politics, once he says to demand that Lonerbox stays, you obviously don't have to, but he has some things for you, and we're gonna bring on those two people. Give me a second.
Okay.
But in the meantime, if you're liking this, give me money.
I'm enjoying it.
Continue to do it. If you want to donate to me, you could throw me some bits, throw me some subs. Oh, also I have a link because Joe Lewis has had some issues. Let me get this link. I'm gonna put a link in chat at some point after I pull these people on and let them talk. And he has a GoFundMe that he's doing. So
I need to go
donate
pee.
that
Be back
if
in a
you
minute.
can. Yeah, I will bring in our individuals.
Oh God.
Oh, they got him.
Hello.
Hello. up, everybody?
You're live, okay? I'm gonna find a GoFundMe link for Joe Lewis, and while I do, but have you guys been listening? Have you guys been have your ear on all this?
No, I haven't heard a single thing about this. So
I-
I'm coming into this fresh.
Yeah, I was
Greetings, Sir
listening mostly
Bathrobe.
along the way. So
This is the cardigan, sir.
Hello, President,
Sorry, I'm just messing.
Mr. or Madam President, whichever one you want.
Oh, so
he must be addressed as Mr. President. Protocol dictates.
Monsieur Presidente.
Okay, I'm putting the GoFundMe
Right.
link in the YouTube and the Twitch chat. So if you're interested,
What's the GoFundMe for?
for Joe Lewis. Joe Lewis recently was let go.
That's nice
from
of
his
you.
employment, and so we try to help people out when we can, right?
Yeah, but why does it say
It'll be fine.
GoFundMe.com/WickTV? What's going on with that, Wick?
It does not, I promise you. But if you
You
want
were trying to pull a fast one on
if
us.
you
if
want to
anybody
check
can
it
help
out,
me out too, I am also unemployed as well.
if you want to put your links, that's cool. I will say this: it's been a wild ride. So I guess I'll ask.
We had a hell of a.
Oh, very, very quickly. So we were randomly blessed with Sonsol's presence in the backstage. Was he booted for some reason?
He had to go. No,
He didn't.
had to
He
go
didn't think
anyway.
that. He thought he was very.
you're allowed.
He was very perplexed.
That was very ambiguously phrased by Wick, though. He didn't say he left voluntarily.
No,
he just said he had to go.
He told me he had a hard cap at 8. It was 8.
Okay, I approve of this.
He told me his cap was 7. He lied to one of us.
He got the Sun Soul got the void. It's fine. Move on.
So yeah, apparently Wick was just going on an unhinged rant about how we have to kill all the police.
Lesson Sell for $5 says, "Is Wick pulling a Keffels with the GoFundMe?" It's not even my GoFundMe. It's not even for
I
me.
shouldn't
You're
have said that. This is how
spreading these
rumors get started.
Like,
My bad.
Look, seriously, Joe Lewis needs help. Give some money to him. if
Yeah,
you
come on, give some money to your boy.
Okay. Anyway, regardless, so we are on. I guess I'll just ask Pondering to start. You had some issues for Loner and for Ancom specifically. Go ahead.
Well,
You can start us
Loner
off.
and Sonsol, but Sonsol's not here, and it's more questions for Sonsol because obviously he and Sonsol are the two that I'm familiar with, and I've interacted with Sonsol before. My understanding was that Sonsol was more centrist, so I wasn't exactly surprised by some of the things that he said throughout the conversation. I was kind of surprised by some of the things Lonerbox said, because my understanding was, and I don't know if he volunteered for this as far as like the position he took, but you either were pigeonholed to defend the moderates or you chose to defend the moderates more than the progressives, which kind of surprised me. So I got a couple of questions for you. And I guess I'll start with, I tried to cohere them. That way we didn't like go off on a bunch of tangents. But when you all were talking about the MLK's letter from a Birmingham jail, I was waiting for somebody to hit you with the white moderate quote, because to me, that is the kill shot. I think that MLK...
I said it.
Right, no, I know. You did hit it. I was saying before you said it, though, I was waiting for
Oh.
somebody to do that. And I think
Okay.
it was the kill shot to hit to your point. And I don't know if you adequately addressed that, because to me, what MLK was making abundantly clear is that the white moderate, even at the time, was a detriment to the civil rights movement. He was a lackluster ally.
Yeah.
So he was political dead weight. Do you agree with that? Do you
Well, he was
accept
worse
that?
than, if I may very
Yeah,
quickly, just
sure.
to addend to that a little bit, it was worse than dead weight. The white moderate acted as a buffer for the people who were reacting against efforts to extend civil rights.
He
Exactly.
literally
Black
said
community.
the white moderate was
Well,
more of a
let's let
stumbling
Loner-
block
sure,
so let-
than
I'd like
the
Loner-
KKK.
Let's let
Right,
Loner
and-
respond. We can't all take a turn. Right, Loner, give your response.
Let Loner
please.
fascist respond.
Yeah, I'll address the first point you made about me being the moderate rather than the progressive. Well, like the progressives, quote unquote, one has a USSR flag. The other two were talking about like the morality of like
Let's
it doesn't
get
matter if fucking
on
cops
with it.
die.
Oh my God, you monologue
enough.
Dylan.
Fair
Good
enough.
lord.
You're not a Stalinist. I'm with
I
you. Neither
spoke
am
for
I.
like
Yeah.
Oh my
No, the
God.
USSR flag is a troll.
Stop,
I'm a
you guys
Marxist.
gotta let Loner go. Okay, Loner, please.
I
I
spoke
mean, well, he
for
better
like
rip then.
I spoke for like 3 seconds. Okay.
That's all we needed.
Stop, Loner. Loner.
Yeah, the white moderate quote, like that's why I brought it up though. The problem is it depends on it depends on what you count as a moderate. The moderates that MLK was talking to was people who were hand-wringing and pearl-clutching over the fact that they broke a segregationist law. But within that essay,
They
Martin
still
Luther
exist
King,
to this day.
Martin Luther King, within that essay, constantly talks about how he himself moderated his own movement.
He's not making a bad point, Jill.
They moderated people when it came to violence. He said that he felt like a moderate between the black community of complacence versus the black nationalists. It just depends. Like, rather than the moderate thing, to me, it doesn't really mean that much because it just depends. Like, someone can tell me, like people with South Africa, right? Like Mandela was quite extreme. People will call his position moderate because he didn't want to deport all the white people. It just depends on what the position is and the context.
I think you made a very compelling case earlier, right towards the very end, that progressivism and conservatism are relative, right? So it depends on the political context in which you exist. In a room full of communists, not only would you be moderate, you may very well be conservative, right? Because it's relative. But I guess I was hearing such a defense even before the MLK quote, like along the way when you were talking about Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, about how important moderates were. But to Monty's point, those types of moderates to which MLK was referring, people who were more concerned about civility politics and tradition for its own sake, they still exist, and they're still undermining the progressive agenda. And so you would say, I assume you would say that type of moderate in 2023, just like it was in 1957, 1966, is useless, right? And an active problem.
Yes.
If you count Sinema and Manchin as the moderates, of course I don't like them. But the problem is, you would take it up with their constituents because, again, they are the only Democrats that those constituents will vote for. Every other candidate, I think, in Manchin's area would go Republican otherwise. So
you're
otherwise,
talking about people. Sorry, you're talking about people like they're stumbling blocks. Sorry,
let Loner finish, and then Victor, you can go. I know we've unevened the panel a little bit, but that's okay. Loner, finish up, and then Victor can go.
So if I was having this conversation with the squad or just like average Democrats, I would say, of course, Manchin and Sinema are inconvenient, moderates. What they stand for is not good. But then if I'm having the conversation with these guys, Biden is the annoying moderate who's hamstringing progression. But I can say, actually, by being moderate, Biden's version of that has been extending COVID provisions beyond the pandemic to give people funds or to child tax relief and all that kind of thing, or the infrastructure bill. So it just depends on where you're.
Well, I hope you don't leave because I want to revisit that with you. I know Victor's going next, but I want to revisit that with you.
It's wild that a lot of the times in this conversation, people on this panel have referred to moderates as stumbling blocks or things in this very dehuman way, when in actuality they're voters, right? And to connect with voters across, they vote, right? So they aren't useless. They're very useful, and I think the job of convincing them is what you should be focusing on, rather than getting upset that somebody who doesn't pass every single ideological purity test that you have before them, they should be cast out. What's that going to do? It's just going to make them want to go to the other side. It's the same thing that happens when very progressive people go, it's not my job to educate you.
To your point,
it's not my job to educate you.
I think you made a great point.
Can I get in here for a second? Sure, if you don't mind. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to cut you off.
After Eli and Victor can respond, right? I want Sunday to go because Sunday hasn't had a chance yet.
I do want Josiah to get their point in though. I'm terribly sorry, sir. But anyways, I do want to say that for me personally, it's more along the lines of not necessarily that they're passing bad legislation, because I can acknowledge that a bad person like Joe Biden is still going to pass a couple of good things here and there, right? That's fine and that's great, but because that's why that's what I voted for him to do. He better do that shit. But for a lot of us, it's not so much the things that he's passing. For in many cases, it's the things that not even just him, but other moderates as well, is the things that they're not passing, that people have been clamoring and begging for. And then even when, it gets brought up to where it's potentially going to get passed or what have you, it gets framed in this light to where, it's not going to get passed anyway. But then we start to question, would it, even if it wasn't, would it get passed? But yeah.
So I think, was I next, Wick?
You were.
I think what Lonerbox is actually putting his finger on, and I haven't been present for the rest of the conversation, so I might be speaking past this already being dealt with. But he's we're talking about moderation in two competing senses here. One is moderating the message so that it's efficacious in a political system that's not amenable to an extreme expression, and the other is moderation as a stance, wherein you are the one who is actually personally taking offense to what you are perceiving as an extreme stance.
Well, we are
violating
I wanna
social
clear it
norms
up.
by going into a segregated space.
I
where
want to
you're not
clear it
allowed
up.
to
I want to
touch.
clear it up. We're talking
Okay.
about stances mostly here. So, for example, right
Yeah.
earlier on the panel, everyone here on the progressive side said it was okay or at least morally neutral to kill police officers. And
Everyone
I'm
did.
curious, right? On the
Like
progressive.
Lonerbox did? That seems like an
No,
No,
that's why I
on
took the
Lonerbox-
moderate
No,
side.
the progressive.
That's
So
what
That's why I
moderate
joined the
means.
social
Eli and
fascists.
Vigilante.
Okay, well, how about this? You can have like an extreme political stance that involves the abolition of the police as an institution, and indeed the villainization of people who become police within present society, and still nonetheless think that it's a very bad and unproductive move. First of all, just for the optics count of it, to declare open season on violence against cops, and also to advocate for it generally on a moral level. Like these are not inconsistent with each other. Police are victims and embedded in like our capitalist institutions as everybody else is.
And
Doesn't make sense.
Sunday, just because
Based.
Wick, I think, misrepresented the opinion. I think
Yes.
myself,
He
does
Eli,
that.
and
He's,
Vigilante
He's a
agree that
deceitful
while-
little hobbit.
Yes. So while we do not wish to see the death of police, we
I don't
are
care.
not morally
No.
objectioned to the event of a policeman being killed by someone.
I get it. You wouldn't
Okay,
listen
sure,
to
but
sleep.
but
Like-
but hang
Yeah,
on.
let's see what happens.
Can I very quickly reply and then I'll be quiet for a little while. So
Please
I have
do.
a,
I'm trying to respond to this, and I can't think of a good.
all right,
response.
okay. I
Please
have a twofold response to that.
help me. Okay.
The first is that, well, yes, you are absolutely not under any obligation to be morally offended at anyone's death, least of all someone who's part of an institution that indeed is persecuting and predating upon like entire categories of the population. Nonetheless, it is both deeply politically unwise to be publicly gleeful about that, since it will absolutely jade large parts of society against you when you are a minority position. And then secondly, it's probably actually not good morally to be fomenting that kind of attitude towards human beings being killed anyways. I think that leads us down a dark path where we remain as uncompassionate as that institution is itself. I don't disagree. There are a lot of bad cops that I would very much like to see meet a very unpleasant end. We've seen footage of people severely abusing their power with like horrific results. But when we're talking about how we interface with the public and how we treat these things, especially in an abstract, distanced way in public, I think the stakes and the standards are different than if, for example, we're talking about like the appropriate attitude for someone who is being actively predated upon by a cop in this moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I hate to interrupt, but I personally, the cop killing thing, just for various reasons, including TOS things, I personally don't want to hover over that too long. So I'd like to return to responding to Victard and then Lonerbox. And then if you all want to go back to that, I'll dip out and you guys can talk about the cop situation. But Victard, to your point, I'll say this. I'll make a concession here because I do think you made, at least initially, a good point. So Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, I don't like them at all, but I prefer Joe Manchin to any Republican replacement because 70 to 80% of the time he has voted with President Biden's agenda, which is relatively speaking more progressive than the alternative. And we have no chance of primarying him successfully. Kyrsten Sinema, politically, it should be open season on her in Arizona because she's in a blue purplish state. She is fair game. She should be replaced. So she has been in many situations an asset to legislation that has made a meaningful difference to Americans and especially even marginalized groups. However, let me give you an example of where she and Joe Manchin have obstructed progress in a way that I think harkens back to MLK's letter from Birmingham jail talking about the white moderate. Voting rights. So you have the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which they tried to pass back in 2021. Now, this is a very popular piece of legislation which would expand federal voting rights across the United States against conservative attempts to suppress the vote, because as conservative and Republicans say all the time, if voter turnout is maximized, they don't win elections.
Exactly.
So even though Manchin and Sinema backed the bill, they voted for it. You had to get 60 votes in order to invoke cloture and pass and get sent to the president's desk. that wasn't going to happen because no Republican, including moderate Republicans, by the way, which is something else. And all the talk about moderates, nobody here talked about the other part of the moderate wing. It's not just moderate leftists. There are also moderate conservatives, people like Nancy Mason, Don Bacon, who say they're moderate, and yet are stumbling blocks for progress along the way too. Nobody ever addressed that. But as far as Sinema and Manchin in particular, they wouldn't vote to do a filibuster carve-out to pass voting rights. That's the kind of white moderate bullshit that MLK was talking about back in the 60s. They care more about these stupid...
We fought this before.
You and I fought about this for
look,
But I would like Lonerbox to respond to that because he was asking for examples earlier.
After Loner and Victor get a chance to respond, I will take this.
Of Sinema and Manchin frustrating progress, popular progress.
Yeah, I agree.
To me, that's one example, and as well as Build Back Better.
Yeah, so I think, it's quite fair to see like Manchin as white moderate in the same sense as the MLK thing. And by extension, I guess his constituents are as well, but whatever. But again, it's just like the frame, right? So if I posed you a different position and said, let's say hypothetically there was a decision between like where the moderate, say with healthcare, where the moderate position might be a public option, like a lot of Europe, and the progressive position is go with Brianna Joy Gray and force the vote for Medicare for all. Obviously, in that case, the white moderates are correct, right? Unless you're a force the vote guy.
Well, no, I'm not a force the vote because I don't think it was politically efficacious. But I'll flip you another one. So you talk about healthcare. I think that's a great example. Do you think, like, you look at Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act? Do you know that for like the first 5 years of like it was passed and became law in 2010, and for the first like 4 or 5 years, it was underwater in terms of its popularity, right? But now it's considered to be a very popular piece of legislation. Moderates attempted to thwart the ACA along the way. So you could see, again, I just feel like you can see examples of both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And again, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, not to keep circulating that, where they have undermined very popular progressive legislation. I was just trying to give you an example of where they've done, like, again, the social spending and Build Back Better is a great example. Wildly popular.
Okay.
They didn't back it, and then they didn't back a filibuster carve-out to pass federal voting legislation. So they have been obstacles.
Yeah, but pondering, again, we removed them from the equation. What replaces them? What replaces them also wouldn't get you it, what's the fucking point?
I said at the very beginning when I made my concession to Victor, and I've told you that if the alternative is a Republican replacement, I'll take Sinema and Manchin over a Republican any damn day of the week. So I'm not disputing that. I'm saying it would be better.
They're marginally better, but like, is it even like, worth it at that point?
Absolutely.
They're very almost indistinguishable.
Not with Sinema because she's primary though. She is so vulnerable. Joe Manchin, absolutely. My goal, what I would love, is to have an Obama era 60-person Senate surplus, and then we keep Manchin and Sinema in the Senate and just ignore them. Just completely ignore them. They get nothing, no concessions. They're basically the losers in high school, have to sit by themselves while Democrats pass whatever they want and they can't do shit about it. But if I have a choice between Manchin and a Republican, I'll take Manchin any damn day of the week. He votes for Biden's progressive judicial nominees. He voted for Ketanji Brown Jackson, bipartisan infrastructure bill.
I want to pass it to Loner and Victor to respond to you. Go ahead, Loner, and then Victor.
No, yeah, that's what I was like. My position was basically that you kind of what I said right at the beginning is just depending on which issue you're framing, then there are definitely situations where whoever has the moderate position is going to be completely in the wrong, and other times when whoever's taken called the progressive position would be in the wrong as well. So yeah, no, that's like a good example as well with the Manchin thing. It's a shame no one else on the panel did it, but okay.
I think for me, you're talking about like you're acknowledging that if we didn't have this person, it would be substantially worse because a Republican would probably get elected in West Virginia, right? But like that's not a reflection of it's a reflection of the politician, but it's also a reflection of the constituents in West Virginia. And it just like I think that going to West Virginia, if you're a progressive and you want substantive change, you would talk to the people of West Virginia and try and convince them on like an individual basis rather than complaining that their views don't align with yours, because they just don't.
Do you think? Well, let me ask you, Victor, if I may. Do you think
Yeah.
that Joe Manchin's going
mean-
to win his next election?
I don't know.
I doubt it, right? So he's not polling very well. He has a radical conservative alternative who will primary him or who will run against him as a
God.
Republican. And here's my question: if part of the duty of a representative is, yes, to reflect the views of their constituents, but also there's a delegate portion as well, where they're also supposed to serve the country, not just their state, right? Because you have state representatives for reasons like state legislatures that are supposed to be concerned for the state. Manchin is a state's representative to the federal government and supposed to consider federal legislation as well, not just within the context of just what West Virginia.
No, you're misconstruing this. Their responsibility is to represent their state's interest within the federal government and the state's interest as reflected by their constituency, right? That is what the framing.
I just have a question for you.
You know, you said it right there. State's interests. The state's interests
as
are
reflected
probably
by their constituency.
Right.
If that's the case, then he shouldn't have backed anything that Biden proposed.
Well,
because
maybe
Biden,
is that why he's not going to be elected next time? Maybe.
Correct.
Oh.
Correct. Because he's seen as too chummy with the president. So if
I-
So the constituents are the white
So he
moderates.
should have been more moderate then.
if it, by your definition, yes. If the goal is simply to regurgitate the views of his particular state, then yes. But I also think that a federal representative, like a senator, has an obligation to consider the rest of the country as well, and to consider the interests of his citizens outside of what they want. West Virginia is a poor, uneducated, unhealthy state relative to the rest of the country, led by Republicans.
Let's dig in on this. Let's dig in on this.
Republican policies don't get red states anywhere. Period.
To represent the interests of their constituencies regardless of what they want. Do you think that a sitting representative should override the will of the people in order to get what they want or think is best for their people?
I think,
Do you think that's a good thing?
Oh, sure. It depends on what the situation is. So, like, there was a time, for example, when slavery was wildly popular or more popular than what it was, but I don't think that a representative had an obligation to enforce slavery simply because his constituents wanted it.
I think what's being sort of loaded onto this, though, is the idea that anything that a constituent does against the will of the people is therefore being done for private, bad.
Well, it is anti-democratic on its face, right? And we could say that, like, okay, sure, there are certain signs like slavery.
Well, sure, but I mean, like a
that, which can be
democratic society
anti-democratic.
can democratically decide to do something abhorrent. Yes, like that's not beyond the pale.
Okay. I was just making sure that.
Yeah,
that's out
the
there.
greatest president in the history of the United States, according to most polls, is President Lincoln, and he was a tyrant, but considered to the conservatives at the time.
Let's get it away from the extremes. and
Democracy
go
was
into the more-
instituted by a tyrant.
Let's go into the more moderate type of styles of things. Obviously, slavery, but when it comes to things like healthcare, if most of your constituency says, actually, no, we don't want this new healthcare. We don't think it's going to be good for us. We don't think it's not something we want you to do. We want to keep this old system. Do you think that you have a moral, right, like a ability to override the will and force it upon them, regardless of what they want?
Do I think that that a representative should vote for it, even if the constituency doesn't like it? Yeah.
Using the state to apply coercive force. Yes.
Sure.
Okay. I just fundamentally disagree.
Little Rock 9, baby. We don't have to go to slavery. I can go to desegregation. Little Rock 9.
Yeah,
President
but
Eisenhower.
I'm going to healthcare. I
understand
healthcare.
that. I understand, but what I'm saying, you and I get into this every time.
What do you think?
All I have to do,
what's the
all I
lowest
have
line?
to do
What's
is
the lowest
show-
line that you're okay with?
all
What's
I
the lowest
have to
line you're
do
okay
is
with
show
using
that you
coercive
have
force
a
to
line
override the
with-
will of the people?
Wick, you have a line. We've been through this. You can pretend that you're an absolutist when it comes to institutions. You're
Slavery,
not. You have a line.
that's up in slavery and desegregation. I
Right.
agree with
There's
you
a time when
I'm
you
asking
say
you
fuck
your
the will of the
lowest line.
people.
I'm
Right.
asking you
It
your
depends.
minimum.
Case by case basis.
Desegregation's probably my minimum. What's yours?
That I would enforce an unpopular. You'd have to give me an
Okay.
example, like healthcare, universal healthcare. That would not be my threshold.
I would also say it really just depends upon like the thing in whether or not it's like better for the people. Like, because also American people right now are very stupid. Like a lot of people, actually, you know what? I don't know if I want to use the word stupid. Maybe I want to use the word uneducated or misinformed or uninformed is a
Misinformed or
words.
deceived. They are heavily
Deceived. Yes,
And
they're heavily
apathetic.
deceived. Yeah, apathetic and heavily deceived by the Decepticons. It's a tragic. You hate to see it, but you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to sit here and like wait for every person who, you know, has had like. Actually, no, I'm not going to say that part.
A majority.
Right. Well, not majority.
No,
Hold
a
on.
majority, a voting majority. Yeah, that's.
No,
I think
that's not where I was. That's not where I was going. I'm
okay,
sorry.
Where are you going? I apologize. Please.
No,
go.
you're fine. You're fine. I just don't necessarily think that we have time in some cases with some of these things to educate every single person when it's like, okay, when a good handful of people are just anti-facts, like anti listening to, you know, empiricism, science, all that type of shit. And it's like, oh, well, you could just form a better argument for them. And it's like, can we? I don't think so. Like a lot of people want to say that there's like that golden argument or a golden argument for every situation is going to win over the hearts of everyone. We just haven't found it yet. And I don't necessarily think that that's the truth. Or if it is the truth, we just don't have the kind of time to like wait around until we find that argument.
Didn't you come into this panel saying that California made up like half of the American population?
What is your point?
You're talking about people being too uneducated to make their own decisions. It's like you also tried to make the point about how most
yeah,
of the
I know.
Americans
I
really
made a-
want like Medicare for all, even though public option is way popular.
I made a sweeping generalization. I didn't just say California.
Okay.
I named other states as well.
I think you just said California.
I mean, maybe if you like actually listen to, you know what? Never mind. It's not worth
So
it.
Okay,
Actually, as I
let me
recall, it was
let me engage with
Sonsol who
this.
came
Let me
in
engage
saying
with
that
this.
California, New York, Texas, and New Jersey
Hang
would
on, it's not
decide
even worth
things.
it. It's not even
All
worth
right.
it. If they want to hear certain things, they want to hear certain things.
So wait,
Wait.
so where do you draw that line then? If you're talking about using like anti-democratic actions to push forward a policy you like you have constitutional stuff for that already, and you have like executive orders are very limited. But as soon as you get rid of that and just say like we're going to do it for healthcare, even though like instead of just going for like a public option, maybe.
I think
Well, I don't
speaking
think-
universals about this. I think speaking universals about this is misguided either way. The state itself is not democratically instituted. There's no moral
Thank you.
imperative to
True.
abide by democratic institutions in all cases. You have to judge on a case by case basis. Does
Thank
this
you,
person
my God.
is this person making a judgment call from their democratically granted status, by the way, to interfere with things for the better in their best judgment with the humble information of like scientists and people who have taken pains to know about things, or are they doing so for private interests or out of like ideological bias?
Well, let's
like
give them
these
the- let's give them the
I don't think saying like in any
voice,
given case must they
right?
dogmatically be.
Let's assume it's not like a private interest, like someone like the corporations are funding them money, or it's not self-interest, but they really truly believe in their heart of hearts that the Voting Act was probably going to
Well,
do
if
more
it's-
harm than good, and
yeah.
even though their constituency wanted it overwhelmingly,
No,
they
I get
decided
you,
to
Wick.
override the will of their constituency.
Yeah, no,
because they believe
I
in their heart of hearts.
I understand you, Wick. So
Alright.
it changes what they're blameworthy for. So if the move is successful and it's positive, then you've determined by that at the very least they had a good idea. You can examine further whether they had the good idea for the right reasons, whether they actually like deployed the right levels of judgment, deferred to the right authorities, etc., and so forth. Or alternatively, if it has a bad effect, maybe they were lucky, or maybe they're blameworthy for being arrogant in how they came to the position that they had. Like it's a bit more complex than just like universally they must defer to the will of the people or not in every single case. That's silly.
Yeah, so
It's
if I
also
may, I'd like to-
it's also about setting precedent, right? If a president takes some sweeping action and uses like some kind of executive action to push forward a policy, say like Medicare for all, but then you're also saying a president that other presidents can come in and do anti-democratic things as
the
well.
problem.
This is actually a
Yeah.
story of how democracies collapse. Is it like one of the
Yes.
big things
It's
about
also
it?
a story of how
Actually,
democracies
This is
are
why we make
formed.
sure.
Actually,
This is why we
I'm
make
gonna
sure we
do the first.
This is why we
sorry,
make
wait,
sure we have
I'm
a
not-
solid constitution.
Well,
Lawyer,
yeah,
go
but
ahead.
the Constitution thing goes against your argument that means presidents can't do things like just throw in Medicare for all, even though it doesn't go through the proper process.
Presidents can. That's actually the function of a president, to be clear. But moreover, you're correct. Like it's a dangerous precedent. But that's the case. Like with the institution of any political constitution.
Well, thank you.
That's go on.
No,
This is-
100%.
I've been talking
Yeah.
for 3 hours.
No.
before this. You go
I
ahead.
was just saying, like, I think you were spitting there because the reality is the idea. again, and I say this with respect, Loner Box, because I'm a big fan of yours, but the implication in your question is that you can bad faith proof a system. You absolutely can't do that. The idea that any action that you can take any sort of action within a democratic republic and it doesn't create some sort of precedent. Look right now at what the Republican Party is doing in the contemporary United States. We see them establish dangerous precedents all the time, or act dangerously without precedents having been established by Democrats. And the idea that, well, if Democrats or if progressives
but when you do that yourself and you make it impossible to tell the difference between what you're doing and what the other side is doing, you lose a lot of moral high ground. You can say, "Oh, that's bullshit. Like it doesn't matter." It absolutely matters.
Wait, just
wait a minute.
wait.
Is the only way you can evaluate
it's like
is
the race to the bottom where we're like,
is
we
the
gotta
only
save
way you-
democracy
right.
by fucking over democracy
Wick,
first.
is the
We
only
have
way
to
you
fuck over
evaluate-
democracy before they do.
If-
right?
I mean, democracy is a
the only
flawed
way you
system.
evaluate-
We have to understand like democracy in and of
Democracy
itself
is a flawed
has,
system, but it's the
has
best
its
system
flaws.
we got, gang.
Right now,
sorry,
right
what the
now,
fuck
sure.
are we, what are we talking
And,
about
like-
though? I thought we were, because Quinn more specifically, I thought we were just on the topic of like Biden by decree giving fucking Medicare for all. Are we off that now, or what are we talking about with?
Well, no, I thought he was talking about like an elected representative like Manchin, a senator voting in contradiction to what his constituents want.
Or in
Which he
that
does
can
though, right? But then
extend
then
up
what
to-
happens after that is he does that and then he loses his seat the next.
Wick,
round.
I'm gonna
Probably gonna
I'm gonna
happen.
I'm gonna I'm gonna
If the
duck out. The pollen's
consequences
eating me
have
alive.
actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Josiah, we should talk sometime.
Absolutely,
gonna
buddy.
go-
Thank you, Mr. President.
I am
Leave it
also
there,
going to
Chief.
go ahead and dip out of here. Thank you for having me on. It was a fun
I'm glad
fun
you guys
experience.
enjoyed it.
fun
Give you,
experience, fun conversation.
It's nice
go
talking to
ahead.
you, Monty.
Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions for Loner Box
Mhm.
before he goes, but I mean, it doesn't have to be right now. But I just want to talk to him at some point.
Were you trying to say something to me, Wick?
No, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. Let's do it again sometime. My name is Nailai Monty, and I will see you guys on the next page. Goodbye.
See you, buddy.
Pondering, you can
Uh,
after this panel we can talk if you want. I don't know.
yeah,
how
we're
long this is
going to
going
end
for.
it pretty close. Pretty close to.
I'll shoot you a
calling it.
friend request.
Oh man, we've gone a long ways. I guess I'll just end by saying this, right? Actually, you know what? No, the people who've sat here and sat through all this, I'm going to give them a closing statement. Sorry, Josiah, you just got here in the open, right? But we're going to give these other individuals a closing statement, and then I have a final thought after they go, and we can get into that. So, Ancom, we'll start with you. Who are you?
All right.
Where can people find you? Brief closing statement. Go ahead.
Name's Ancom Psycom. You can find me at that on Twitter, and that's about the only place I am these days. And as far on Discord as well. But anyways, just because someone mentioned that they did not like the language of stumbling block, I'm going to actually read this quote that people have been talking around for half of
The
this panel.
fucking quote.
I have been
Wanking.
gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Where can people find you?
Oh, Twitter, at Ancom Psycom, or on Discord, same name.
Okay. Check him out, gang, if you like what he has to say. Next up, Lonerbox. Go ahead.
The white moderate quote is good. He was talking to people who were hand-wringing about them breaking a segregation law. Problem is that quote gets misused by the most insane fucking batshit leftists who want to just use it as a way to like shovel in their like ridiculous policy that no one believes in. But okay, I want to abolish the police and replace it with some community action through the consensus of the people. What, like a fucking lynch mob? Oh, you disagree with me? You're a white moderate. Like, fuck off. It's just that, yeah, it's just like a way that people cope with the fact that their positions don't really make that much sense. So white moderate, just fall back on that. Yeah, I don't know. I think some policies make sense and some don't. It's maybe a bit more simple way to look at it. I'm Lonerbox, YouTube, etc.
Check him out, gang. We like Lonerbox. We'll have him on more often. He's a great guy. Hopefully, if he can stand being on after this shit show. Victard, go ahead. Where
What's
can people
going
find
on?
you, and what are your thoughts?
So yeah, people can find me. I'm on Instagram at The Road to Hell with 4 L's and a couple underscores between those words. IG, my Twitter is Resident Trapper. But yeah, just I think that moderates. I think that some of the things that people have said in this debate is exactly why we do need moderates to pull people back from some potentially bad ideas, not necessarily to hamstring them from the good ones. And that's a case by case basis. Is everything going to be perfect all the time? Of course not. We're human beings. That's the name of the game. But I think things have been getting better in this country for a very long time. And I think that I think that the system's relatively working, and that's as much as we can hope for. So
Okay, thank you for being here.
cheers.
And we'll have you on again. Hopefully, I thought you were very
Hopefully.
well spoken. Check him out.
Well,
gang.
and the next time I will actually write my opening and not rely on ChatGPT.
Yeah, that was a little weird.
Sorry.
Next up, The Vigilante TV. Go ahead.
So, I mean, moderates as people are fine, but when we have as much moderates in the system that we do, and it's just a system, specifically like two-party system like we have in the United States, it becomes a problem because we just have a ratchet effect of just going one way, and the progress is overly slow. And I mean, I would say like having moderates would be perfectly fine if we had a multi-party democracy, but we don't. And that's just a fact of how democracy works. Just being in a two-party system, it doesn't a moderate party and a right-wing party. It's going to, you might get progress sometimes, and then every other time it's going to just slowly go back to the right. And it comes up with that problem every time. And you can see that across the board with where Trump was president. You can see that in states like Florida, Texas, and pretty much most of the South right now. And yeah, so, and you can find me on Twitch at The Vigilante TV, underscores between the words, and on Twitter as well.
Okay, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Gang, we'll see you guys later. So I'm gonna move you off.